There was no one stronger than cultivator Makoto Yamori on the Luke continent. He was absolutely invincible. Neither monsters nor demons could defeat and kill a warrior, because no enemy was capable of intimidating a person who had reached such an incredible form. Our hero's sword did not spare anyone who dared to attack him. They all fell after the first blow. This was his way of showing who was in charge here. Another brutal and grueling battle ended in victory, and our hero noted that everything went smoothly as always. During his life, there were hundreds, if not thousands of such battles. He managed to destroy the Demon Lord's army. The threat hanging over the world disappeared, and Yamori's companion congratulated him on his victory, noting that it was time to move on to the next stage. Our hero received the betrayal of his friends instead of a reward for completing the Dark Age. These were swords and spears in the back from those he trusted the most. Makoto Yamori was a victim of his own gullibility. He didn't even know that his friends were capable of such treacherous treachery. It was difficult for him to speak, but the right words came out of his mouth, and they did not bode well for his enemies. The hero spoke slowly. He asked why they did this, not even expecting to get an answer from these bastards, because it was unnecessary now. He straightened up abruptly and shouted that he would definitely take revenge, that none of the traitors would get mercy. Let them remember this. And at the same time, his body began to disappear into thin air. In the next instant, strange voices began calling out Yamori's name in alarm, and someone informed the teacher that the young man had woken up. The pretty girl waved her hand, checking whether the hero sees and hears normally. She wanted to make sure that the guy is able to see and hear. Makoto Yamori was sitting on the floor with his back against the wall as a crowd of classmates and teachers gathered in front of him. The warrior's last thought was that he would drag the traitors with him to hell, but the surroundings didn't look like hell at all. Someone said that the young master couldn't possibly be such a weakling, to which another disciple pointed out that Yamori had already been kicked out of the clan and shouldn't be called master anymore. One of the students turned to a guy named Kitamo, remarking that you shouldn't waste time on this garbage, especially now. It's better to continue the test. A new record is just around the corner. The young man grinned. There were already quite a few records on his account, so another one was just a matter of time. There was an announcement about the beginning of the physical abilities test. Suddenly, streams of glow swirled around our hero. Memories of the guy whose body he had possessed returned to him. Makoto Yamori realized that now he was not on the Luke continent, but in a completely different world. The hero was reborn in a human body. Its previous owner was an aristocrat, but terribly weak, so the family turned against him, and classmates mercilessly bullied. The attempt to rise was not very successful. The great warrior literally trembled at the thought that after death, he was transported to another world and again became a nobody. But the worst part was that the people here didn't even know about the existence of the cultivation art and how it worked. There was no way to use the spiritual chi energy that the people of the Luca continent received from the environment. It gave strength and supernatural abilities. Yamori tried to feel the chi again, this time more successfully. But the energy was weak, but better than nothing. The warrior knew how to fix it and what to do. Cultivation teaches you to accumulate the maximum amount of ki energy, and then even this weak body can be made invincible. After assessing the possibilities, the hero realized that he was now at the first level of cultivation, whereas in the previous world, he was at the 11th. After regaining his lost power, he would be able to return to the continent, which was going to be the main task for Makoto Yamori in the near future. He was desperate for revenge. The young man sighed heavily. It was unpleasant to be at the very beginning again. The thought of having to start from scratch was not at all pleasant. He decided to take a physical potential test together with other students to determine the capabilities of the new body and understand what to work on first. The young man came closer, and one of the students asked in surprise why he even decided to participate in the test in such a state. It's crazy. Makoto Yamori ignored the question and only asked his mentor what the next test was. When he heard that the 100-meter run, the guy said that he would also run. The teacher announced that it was now the turn to take the Kitamo test, the record holder for running not only in the school, but also in the entire region. The young man, hearing who wanted to compete with him, burst out laughing. He doubted that our hero would be able to make at least some competition and continued to mock and brag. Makoto was only at the first stage of cultivation right now, and even for a moment he wondered if he should enter into this confrontation. But he also knew that a cultivator's physical potential was beyond the reach of ordinary people like Kitamo. The long-haired guy explained that Yamori would be Kitamo Hayashi's only opponent, because the other test participants simply refused to participate. The coach gave the command to take places on the treadmills, and in a few seconds the command to start should sound. The opponent took a stance and prepared to run at the limit of his abilities. He was eager to set a new record, but our hero was in no hurry to take the right pose. Hayashi concentrated. He was completely confident in his physical abilities and was clearly going to rub his opponent's nose. A gunshot rang out, signaling the start of the race, and it was surprisingly loud for Makoto Yamori. Kitamo leapt forward at full speed and raced towards his goal, a new school record. Much to his surprise, his opponent still hadn't moved, prompting another round of ridicule. In fact, the hero deliberately gave Hayashi a head start of 3 seconds and only then was going to start running. According to his calculations, this was the best strategy. After counting down the required amount of time, the guy also started, instantly covering a huge distance. His speed was simply incredible. The students and teachers simply froze with their mouths hanging open. No one expected this from the loser Makoto Yamori. However, such a reaction was not something new for our hero. After all, he was once the first cultivator in the entire Luke continent. It was time to show the people of this world that the limits of the human body's capabilities were almost unlimited. The young man was rushing forward at top speed. He stopped right in front of the red ribbon finish line. The opponent was left far behind, and this was exactly what the confrontation between an ordinary person and a cultivator looked like. When the finish line was only a few meters away, Hayashi was surprised to realize that today he wasn't the first. It didn't take him more than a few seconds to catch up with Yamori. The difference between them was about the same as between a modern human and his Stone Age ancestors. All that remained was to end this farce and clearly show who was who in this still alien and strange world. Our hero calmly stretched out his hand, pulled the red finish line towards him, and did not give the opponent a chance to finish the race as the winner. It was just incredible, as Makoto Yamori set a new record, beating Hayashi by more than 6 seconds. The young man slammed his fist down on the path in utter disbelief. He just couldn't accept that this was actually happening. The cultivator himself did not feel satisfied. His strength was far from what it was before, and his body was too weak, but it was still a victory. However, the warrior did not get the worst body. His potential was actually huge. With proper training, progress can be very fast. As we know, Makoto was once the strongest cultivator of the Luke continent, and for 50 years he honed his skills, trained his body, and controlled chi energy. The warrior had countless followers, and there were also plenty of enemies, but none of them could even come close to matching his strength. Cultivation masters, ferocious monsters, and devious demons had fallen at his feet, none of them able to challenge Yamori openly. And now, he felt an opportunity to ascend again. The great cultivator realized that in the future, he would once again rise to the very top and look down on all those who had not come close to his level. This time, he will remember that even a friend can betray, and will not let the wolves in sheep's clothing get too close. Almost immediately after finishing the test, the young man went to the toilet to wash up, where he got a good look at his new face and body in the mirror for the first time. Makoto Yamori decided that it was possible to increase one's chi level with pills, but they were incredibly expensive, and it would take millions to reach the 11th stage. But the guy whose body it possessed had absolutely no money. It was impossible to buy even the simplest ingredients. This meant that he would have to rely on his own skills. The cultivator remembered that he could create talismans. They could be sold. The only problem was that there was not enough money for even the simplest materials, and the situation became absurd. To get his revenge, he needed to rise up again and become powerful. But to do that, he would first have to learn how to make money in the new world. The young man's thoughts were interrupted by a chuckle behind him. As if Hayashi wasn't going to end the confrontation on the treadmill, he enlisted the support of 2 thugs and went in search of our hero. Noticing him in the toilet, the record holder said that it was pointless to hide from the deserved punishment. The opponent brought with him friends, the head of the boxing club Osaka Haru, and the captain of the track and field team Hakubo. The cultivator searched through the body's memory and found that the 2 had taken money from the previous owner under the guise of protection fees, Hada Leiki and Akira. Leiki also went to the bathroom. They were the ones behind the whole murky scheme of extorting weak students. Hakubo said that Makoto Yamori was a bit strange today and asked his friend to sort it out, but the boxer just rolled his eyes, noticing that he would deal with such garbage in a second. After shouting confidently that 1 punch would be enough, the blonde swung and charged. For some reason, everyone at that moment felt that his movements were too slow, perhaps because Makoto Yamori dodged in an instant. And not only did he dodge, but he immediately launched a counterattack and delivered a blow of such force that no one could have expected from him. Blood spurted out like a fountain. Boxer's eyes rolled back in his head, and his body arched in a way that had never happened before in these walls. Makoto froze in a theatrical pose, watching out of the corner of his eye as the enemy flew away to the opposite end of the room, toward the wall. Our hero was well aware that it was impossible to stop there. A series of kicks was merciless. One of them landed squarely in the face of a long-haired hooligan who was bullying him before the 100-meter race. The other 2 froze, not knowing whether to run or pray, shaking with terror. But it was still too shameful to run. The cultivator wasn't going to be bullied and bullied. The enemies of the guy whose body he possessed didn't know who they were messing with yet. They pulled themselves together and tried to counterattack, and it was a fatal mistake. The attack failed as soon as it started. The young man stopped their attacks by simply stretching out his arms, which was enough to instantly disarm both of them. A small, almost smug grin spread across his face as his enemies realized that they couldn't break free of their grip. The young man's fingers tightened, and they both fell to their knees, begging to be released and not hurt in broad daylight. In response, Makoto Yamori suggested that you calm down and just enjoy the moment while you still have the chance. The screams of the bandits grew louder. The pleas became more desperate. The scene teetered on the edge. A little more and chaos would reign. Having heard enough pleas for mercy, our hero did not just let go of his hands. He hit the enemies with terrifying force against each other and only then let go. When Hakubo realized that it was a bad case, he stammered out an apology, asking for forgiveness and offering to forget all misunderstandings. Out of the corner of his eye, Makoto saw a boxer sneaking up from the flank and clearly wasn't going to give up so easily. He tried to throw a punch, but his arms wouldn't work. His muscles were cramped from the previous blow, and the blonde swore angrily. Still, Osaka Haru lunged forward, intending to slap the face of the impudent man who had allowed himself too much. This time, his speed was not enough again. Makoto Yaimori was faster and slapped the boxer's cheek even harder than before. The enemy flew into the yellow wall, throwing his head back theatrically. It was obvious that he would not recover so quickly now. The meaningful expression finally disappeared from the blonde's face, and consciousness left his body for the next half hour. The cultivator's eyes flashed with rage as he fiercely threatened that there would be no mercy next time. Let the hooligans remember this. Hakubo clasped his hands in prayer, hoping to remain unnoticed, whispering that our hero was a real monster. The hooligans started apologizing all at once, their words interspersed with desperate pleas not to get too close, all three of them shaking. Realizing that the desired effect was achieved, Makoto calmly stated that in this case, they should return what is rightfully his. The scoundrels pretended that they didn't understand, although in fact they understood very well that the guy wanted to return his money, which they knocked down for protection. He glared at the bandits and once again repeated that they had taken something from him not so long ago. It was time to return it. From horror at hooligans, tears splashed from eyes, and they promised to return everything to the last kopeck. With a bow, Kitamo handed our hero everything they had on them in cash, which he hoped would be enough. Makoto Yaimori walked down the corridor while the students dragged the battered boys to the infirmary and wondered if he had gone too far. But the bullies still wouldn't have dared to complain. The young man thought that the school was too crowded. He would have to think of something to spend as little time there as possible. A nice compensation was a decent bundle of bills. The money was obtained much faster than expected. This amount should have been enough to buy the necessary ingredients to create talismans. This would be the first step on the road to sweet revenge. In fact, in the world where our hero came from, talismans were mostly used by low-level cultivators. As a rule, they were subordinated to one of the elements, so the materials for creating them were selected accordingly. Cultivators could use talismans to ascend one or more steps, but this didn't always work, although it gave them the opportunity to cheat. By infusing special ingredients with chi energy and sealing it in paper, Makoto Yaimori could achieve several different effects. Even as a first-stage cultivator, he was able to create a whole batch of such artifacts without much difficulty. Soon, the colorful pieces of paper were completely ready for use, and all that remained was to sell them profitably. The young man sorted them into neat piles by color and superpowers. It turned out quite a lot. The cultivator was satisfied. Now he had the opportunity to enrich himself quite well, which means buying even more quality materials and strengthening this body. After thinking about this, the hero looked around. It was necessary to find a suitable place for training and other important activities. A few days later, he was quite comfortable in the city and even managed to find a suitable route for morning jogging. But the sale of talismans did not go on. For 3 weeks, they did not manage to sell a single one. People were suspicious of such things. One day, the young man heard some kind of plaintive barking under his feet. He had never met dogs before, so he was surprised. The animal whined piteously, and when it realized that it had managed to attract the guy's attention, it began to do it even louder. The dog was badly maimed and could barely stand on its paws apparently. It had a hard time. Apparently, the animal was hit by a car. After a second, the dog collapsed on its side, all its strength completely exhausted. Makoto Yaimori squatted down to get a better look at the dog's wounds. He thought it was a great opportunity to test the effectiveness of his talismans. He took out a green piece of paper and it immediately began to glow slightly, activating healing properties. This talisman was supposed to strengthen the dog's body and heal all physical injuries. The glow was getting stronger by the second. The animal happily jumped up and began to bark gratefully. Not a scratch was left on it. It seems that the cultivator did not lose his ability to create artifacts. With a satisfied look, he patted the dog. The rapid healing was a pleasant surprise for it, and good news for the young man. Suddenly, the beast bared its teeth and began to growl, as if those responsible for its injuries were approaching. There were Showada, Nas Glacier of the Wada Empire, and Shizuri Suga. From the Suga clan, the guy asked the girl not to worry. It's just a dog. It's not scary if it dies. The girl was indignant that he hit the animal, and now does not allow to take the dog to the vet, completely lost his conscience. Before she could finish speaking, Shizuru's eyes widened in surprise. Apparently the trip to the doctor was now cancelled. The animal was picked up by some guy. It was completely unharmed. This completely did not fit in with the previous events. The girl rushed to him, shouting how this is possible, why the dog is healthy, and what the hero did. Wada shouted that some garbage is devouring their time. Shizuru said that she thought the dog would not survive. She was covered in blood, and now there is no trace of the wounds. How is this possible? Makoto Yamori was in no hurry to answer. He was carefully looking at the stranger. She had a package with the hospital logo. It seems that the girl was going to visit someone. This was the perfect opportunity to finally find their first customer to buy the talisman, and it was a chance that couldn't be missed. The hero showed a piece of paper and said that he used it. It is a healing artifact that completely cured the dog. Wada didn't give Shizuru a chance to take the talisman. He pushed the hero's hand away, shouting that he was a pathetic fraud and was trying to fool them. The young man said that Makoto deliberately threw the animal under their wheels to breed for money. The girl again ignored her companion and only asked if the talisman would work on anyone, or just a dog. After realizing that she wanted to save someone, the cultivator explained that it was possible to heal anyone, even someone who was in a coma. He explained that this artifact is called spirit purification, so it is suitable for those cases when consciousness has already left the body, and not just for diseases and injuries. Shaw shouted that if his cousin expected to save her mother with a piece of paper, it was time for her to see a psychiatrist. Our hero continued to explain how to use the talisman. It should simply be brought to the one who needs to be healed. He showed the bundle of artifacts and named the price. The big ones cost 20,000 yuan, and the small ones cost 10,000 yuan, not that expensive for saving a person. Shizuru said that she would give him 50,000 and take everything she had, and Wada yelled that she was definitely crazy. He raised his hand to push Makoto Yamori away, telling him that it was time for him to just get out of here and not mess with them. The cultivator grabbed the attacker's wrist with such force that he fell to his knees. The girl has already agreed to the deal and no one dares to stop it from taking place. Our hero calmly said that anyone who dared to stand in his way would regret it, but his eyes burned with the fire of rage. In the next instant, the cultivator yanked Wada's arm and threw him several meters away, as if he weighed nothing at all. He took the check and handed Shizuru a few more talismans of different colors. There were more than just healing ones. Yellow had protective properties, and red had the ability to summon a fireball. This might come in handy, but still, our hero really hoped that this would not happen and the beauty would not need mascots in the near future. The girl thanked him. She was even a little touched. But that was the end of the conversation. She didn't even have time to ask what the guy's name was. I had to call out to him and ask the appropriate question. The probability of getting an honest answer was extremely low. He was already some distance away, and without turning around, he waved his hand, saying that his name was Makoto Yamori. The dog decided to accompany the cultivator. Shizuru silently watched them go, and her cousin, who managed to get to his feet, hissed that the guy was definitely a fraud. The beauty clutched the talismans in her hand, and she knew that it was a little naive to trust a stranger, but still it gave at least some hope. Our hero slowed down a little so that the dog could keep up with him. He had already decided that he would keep it for himself. But if you have a pet, you also need housing. Since the money was on hand, it was possible to find an apartment. It was also a good idea to find medicinal herbs for cultivation, Yamori muttered to himself. But immediately the dog became alert. She turned around and began to stare intently into the bushes, after which she gave the signal with a loud and joyful bark. The house that the dog was looking at was almost completely enveloped in a blue glow of chi, as if there was some unusual flower growing in the front garden. Looking in the right direction, the young man almost sat down in surprise right on the road. The dog showed him a real gift. There was a silver heartgrass growing in the garden near the mansion, which made the entire area bathe in chi. Meanwhile, Wada was struggling with the effects of the guy's fingers, death grip on his wrist, and the wound needed to be treated. The nurse humbly performed her duties as she listened to a torrent of abuse directed at the charlatan who had deceived Shizuru and injured the young master. The guy shouted that the fraudster was just awful, and if he got in his way again, he would get what he deserved. Shizuru's father, a member of the Nakai City Council named Suga Kenchi, chuckled at the scene. He reproached his daughter for the fact that her cousin nobly agreed to accompany her, and in gratitude received an injury. The girl shames the family with her behavior. The man accused the girl of trusting a fraudster and now trying to turn her family into a laughingstock, using questionable talismans of a charlatan. The nurses were already whispering that the counselor's daughter was not very bright and had dumped tens of thousands for useless pieces of paper. Rich people are so easy to deceive. Despite this amount of aggression, Shizuru decided that she should still try using the artifacts. She held the phone up to her mother and decided in a whisper that she really hoped she hadn't trusted a stranger for nothing. Her father started yelling that it was too much, that she should stop playing this circus immediately. But the girl thought that if there was even the slightest chance, she would use it. The counselor was fiercely indignant that a little more and his daughter would begin to believe in some incomprehensible gods. Shizuru indignantly exclaimed that she was trying to do something, but he himself was in no hurry to take any action. The beauty asked how many times he visited her mother. If the fact that she was ill was discovered earlier and the woman got to the hospital in time, the trouble would not have happened. The daughter asked if Shugakenshi could say with confidence that he did everything possible to save his wife. The question caught him off guard. The girl sadly remarked that if his mother was gone, he would not be too upset and just continue to have fun with other women. Her father swung to slap her for being so disrespectful and rude, and he was literally out of control. Still, sanity prevailed, or the protective charm worked, and the advisor suddenly realized quite clearly that Shizuru was right, and his hand froze in midair. Then, the man simply made a fist and put it in his pocket, noting that no one dares to be so bold. But he understands that the girl is beside herself with grief. With the words that it was time to end all this, the beauty's father turned in the direction of the exit from the ward. Shugakenshi said that he would go for the doctors to disconnect all these tubes. His wife has been in a coma for too long and there is no hope. Shizuru started crying. She promised her mom that she wouldn't give up and let this happen. The hand holding the talisman started to shake. The girl pressed her mother's hand and the talisman to her face, continuing to repeat something affectionate and encouraging. Suddenly, she heard a faint voice, but she couldn't believe it wasn't a hallucination or a trick of her hearing. The father, who had not yet left the door, looked back. He also recognized the voice of his wife, and now could not understand how this was possible. Yokosuga looked affectionately at Shizura and gently asked why her daughter had lost so much weight. The girl screamed in surprise, and Shugakenshi ran to the corridor to immediately call the doctors. A miracle happened. It's hard to believe, but the man was incredibly happy, almost happy. He shouted loudly that his wife woke up. The doctor and nurse both stared, thinking he was joking. Then the doctor cautiously asked if it was true. He ran into the room with an order to immediately send the woman for examination, to make sure that the patient does not get worse. The doctor cautiously promised the counselor that if everything went according to plan, in a year and a half, Yoko-S could return to a full life. Shizuru couldn't believe that the talisman actually worked. Maybe it was just a happy coincidence. But when the second piece of paper began to shine and slowly disappear into thin air, the girl realized that the artifacts were the reason for her mother's healing. The entire staff, my father, and my cousin all exclaimed in unison that this couldn't be happening. But they had seen everything that had happened with their own eyes. The doctor ordered to contact Professor Tsujuki from the award committee, and Showada rubbed his eyes in confusion. Shizuru's cousin suddenly realized that the stranger he was accusing of cheating was a real celestial. Mother and daughter hugged each other. The woman apologized for making everyone so worried about her, and both were crying. Finally, the beauty wiped away her tears, and she held the rest of the talismans tightly in her hand, thinking that if she ever met Makoto Yamori again, she would thank him for everything. Meanwhile, our hero with his modest belongings and a dog stood on the threshold of the house in which they were to settle. The move was over, and now it was time to train and prepare for revenge. The first step towards returning to the Luke continent was done. Those who betrayed him will pay for it, no matter what it costs a cultivator. Such things are never forgiven by anyone. As he thought of his enemies, the young man became more and more aware of the massacre and what he would say to each of them before they died. But first, you need to go back to the 11th stage of cultivation. It will require a lot of work with spiritual chi and appropriate materials. He promised himself that he would work as hard as he could to make sure that the time of reckoning for his betrayal came as quickly as possible. By the evening, the guy clearly realized that the amount of chi in this world is very scarce. At this rate, it will take him hundreds of years to achieve the goal. And the body is mortal. He lay in bed and thought that self-cultivation would quickly come to a standstill if he didn't do something. He needed to find a place or an item that was overflowing with chi. At first, it seemed that spiritual springs or rare artifacts would do, but there is a possibility that you can use something else as well. For example, the same flower that the dog helped him find, now a silver charm grew in the new house. Unlike medicinal herbs that strengthen the body, such spiritual materials can strengthen the very essence of a person, his inner strength, and raise the level of cultivation. Our hero looked at the flower and decided that if he created Juki pills from the plant, he could immediately ascend to the second stage. But if you fail, there will be no problems. You need to be extremely careful. The dog began to bark, as if confirming this idea. You never know when trouble will come, so you need to train at every opportunity. With this thought in mind, our hero left the house the next day. He tried to sell his talismans again, but no one was interested. The ingredients for Juki were expensive, so he had to come up with something. Suddenly, the guy noticed suspicious people walking towards him, but he didn't show it. It seems that someone's attention was still attracted. Makoto Yaemori seems to have found the problem on his own, although he would have liked something more pleasant while the strangers kept their distance. They had been following the cultivator since the third day of his attempts to sell artifacts, but they didn't get any closer. There were more of them today, so they decided to move on to action. The guy decided to take a closer look at the enemies and began to collect talismans from the ground in a bag. At this moment, a pleasant voice called out to him. A pretty girl in a pink sweatshirt addressed the guy by name. It seems that she was familiar with the previous owner of this body and did not expect to see him here. It was a classmate who said that she hadn't expected to see Yaemori here and asked why he hadn't been on campus for so long. The hero did not have time to answer. The beauty continued to reflect that he was kicked out of the clan, and therefore the young man does not have time and opportunity to continue his studies. The cultivator searched through his memories and came to the conclusion that this was the girl who had constantly stood up for the previous owner of this body. Meanwhile, the classmate had already started rummaging in her purse, saying that she would give him some money if she would just let him go back to school. Without waiting for her to pass him the bills, the guy turned around and walked to the side, saying that he was busy right now. There were urgent matters. At first, the girl tried to call out to him, but then fell silent, realizing that this behavior was clearly caused by some problems. Makoto Yaemori is in trouble. He walked forward on the street, counting the number of possible opponents. 7 enemies were on the left and 3 on the right. The guy decided that he would easily finish off everyone, but not here. He began to run, and the pursuers rushed after him. They were armed. Someone gave the order to take him, and several more bandits followed the young man into the alley. There was a dead end ahead. There was nowhere else to run, and the cultivator stopped, wondering how much time he had. The bandits were already there, and although our hero did not look back, he could hear their footsteps and voices quite clearly. He said slowly, almost syllable by syllable, that now was the time to attack. Let them all do it together, at the same time. This greatly amused the enemies. There were many of them. A bald guy was standing in front and twirling a sharp disc on his finger. Then the bandit began to knead his knuckles, as if hinting that he was going to use his fists. But he noticed that he didn't have to run for long. Makoto Yaemori asked why they were following him, and why they had been following him for the past few days, interfering with his business. The hero asked who was keeping them on a leash and got the answer that he was an impudent man, crossed the road to a large conglomerate and traded as if nothing had happened. It is not clear why the young lady of the Amatani clan liked such garbage, but in the next life he will definitely not be so lucky. The cultivator remembered that the previous owner of the body was engaged to Amatani Setsu. But something went wrong. The betrothal was broken off as soon as he was expelled from his clan. Is this really a reason for persecution? It doesn't look like much. It's already too much. Makoto Yaemori decided that it was possible to make guesses endlessly, but it was much easier to force out the answers he needed. Meanwhile, a classmate was watching what was happening. She was surprised to realize that the Yakuza were trying to kill Yaemori, but she couldn't know what he was doing to annoy them. No matter what he did to annoy them, the guy couldn't defeat heavily armed bandits with such a weak body. The girl decided that it was urgent to call the police and immediately took out her phone from her purse, dialing the desired number. Before she could make the call, one of the Yakuza came up from behind her and noticed that the lost kitten didn't belong here. With a ferocious face, the bald man asked who the beauty was calling, and it was obvious that he already knew the answer. Our hero heard Mochiyama shouting to be released immediately. He guessed that the classmate followed him. The bandits started whispering among themselves about the boss coming. They even looked a little scared. Finally, a bandit with scars appeared. He literally dragged the young man's classmate by the scruff of the neck. Makoto was furious. He didn't understand why the beauty was getting into trouble, so she was putting his plan in jeopardy. He stood there and said nothing, while the boss said that he was a real ladies' man. First Miss Setsu was seduced, and now another beauty. Apparently, such jokes gave the man great pleasure, as well as the fright of his young victim, trying to free himself. It turned out that the girl was not worried about herself. She screamed shrilly that Yaemori should run away. The bandits are armed. The girl said that they would not dare to offend her, since she was the daughter of the Keijo Mochiyama clan, which surprised the Yakuza. But not too much, the boss thought for a moment and laughed, saying that if they buried her right here, no one would notice. He added that there would be no witnesses left anyway, and it was clear from the bandit's face that this was not a joke at all. The big man took out a dagger and prepared to kill Mochiyama, but the girl asked him not to. In response, the bald man remarked that it was her own fault that she was stupid enough to get involved in such a mess. Another second and the fatal blow would have been delivered. The cultivator charged with all his might, aiming his fist at the bandit. One blow was enough to send the knife flying out of the man's hand, and from the look of his fingers, it looked like they were broken. After completing the jump, our hero said that he really was going to not shine for a while and lie low. He then placed his hand on the bandit boss' face and added that he only changed his mind because it wasn't his style to stay in the shadows for long. With that, Makoto Yaemori made a spinning motion and slammed the bandit's head into the wall. The impact had left a huge dent in the surface, but it was strange that the skull hadn't split in two. Mochiyama stared in horror at what was happening, unable to believe that it was really her classmate who was a loser. The boss put his hand to his face, and the other Yakuza froze in place, unable to react properly. Our hero frowned and sternly remarked that he would ask only once who sent them. Let them answer, or they would die. The police were not so far away from the scene, and the regional inspector was informed that the Scar Gang was active again. The man grabbed a walkie-talkie and began to clarify the details. Most of all, he was interested in when and where the Yakuza were seen. The dispatcher reported that about 30 people are moving towards East Street. It seems that a child, a schoolgirl, is being held hostage. The inspector urgently requested reinforcements from the headquarters, but asked not to report to the chief of aboutage. He abruptly turned the car around. The man gave an order to the reinforcements not to stick out ahead of time. When it comes to bad guys, you need to calculate every step. There was no response, and the police officer began to clarify whether the dispatcher had passed on his order to his subordinates. The walkie-talkie was silent for a while, then there were strange exclamations of surprise, and the answer that there was no need for this anymore. The attendant reported that some guy had dealt with the bandits because the police now have nothing to do there. This was indeed the case. Makoto Yaimori was standing in front of a classmate, with the yakuza he had beaten lying around. Only the boss remained conscious, our hero holding him directly by the bald skull, like a toy that could not stand on its own. The man asked if this was the same brat from the Yaimori clan, if the scars could lose to him so easily. The young man asked where the yakuza got the information about him, from the Amateri clan, or from the Yaimori clan, his eyes burning with anger. There was no answer, so the cultivator said that he would give the man 3 seconds to think, and then he would not vouch for himself. The scar boss started asking for a little more time. It's hard for him to speak. The man's tongue really didn't obey him. Here, behind our hero's back, the order was given to stop and not move. It seems that new participants in this protracted scene have appeared. It was the police. The inspector of the region ran forward and asked the guy to stop and not kill anyone, not to lower himself to the level of bandits. Makoto Yaimori looked around. He didn't believe that the appearance of the police was just a coincidence. Someone had given them the information they needed. He was trying to figure out what was best to do. He didn't want to leave the boss alive at all, and there was every chance of breaking through by force. But still, going against the law enforcement agencies with this body and its social status will not be so easy. It is a big risk. The young man decided that he would obey the order and then release the head of the boss of the criminal group. The man immediately began to convince the police that he was fine. It is not necessary to take any additional measures. The inspector exhaled. He managed almost at the last moment, not allowing the guy to become a murderer, getting involved in problems with the law. He still couldn't believe that this schoolboy had managed to defuse a yakuza with his bare hands like this. The policeman introduced himself. His name was Kreya Haruk. This is his precinct, so we need witness statements. Mochiyama waved a little sheepishly and said that it was very nice to meet the inspector. Kreya replied that there was no need to worry too much about the mess. His colleague, Rokuhara Fumiya, would clean up and make sure everything was in order. Our hero was a little afraid of the fact that the government is tracking all the incidents. Meanwhile, the police asked to tell in detail what exactly happened here. Then there was a loud shout, and someone announced that they had arrived just in time to prevent the criminal from escaping from the scene. It was the same boss whom I asked not to inform. He gave the order to immediately arrest the guy. Aonij Reizuo, the police commissioner, said that a report should now have been drawn up on these students. Among other things, he has a warrant for the arrest of Makoto Yaimori. The man bent down to the young man's face and showed him a piece of paper. Mochiyama indignantly stood up for her classmate, saying that this was out of the question. The yakuza attacked first. The man replied that he didn't see it, but he watched the guy turn them into a chop with his own eyes, and the boss of the bandits chuckled happily. The inspector was indignant. He said that Onaga knows perfectly well who these people are. It is not clear for what purpose they are being protected. At the reproach of saying something wild, the commissar flushed with rage, his eyes blazing with evil fire. The man threatened to strip the subordinate of his badge for such words. Since when did he become so bold? He swore, not intimidated by the prospect, all the cop wanted was a fair investigation. Rokuhara Fumiya tried to calm the inspector down, but it was obvious that he wasn't happy about getting a new chief. Then our hero suddenly said that if so, let them arrest him. And Haruk exclaimed in surprise that this was madness. Makoto Yaimori was calm. He realized that the puppet master had pulled the strings to frame him, so it would be easier to find out who was behind all this. Aonega laughed that the young man was too trusting for a criminal, too naive a student, and shook off the inspector's hand. The guy decided that if he didn't deal with this, his cultivation progress would be compromised. So he started asking questions and was the first to ask how the police knew that he was a student. The commissar frowned. He didn't even notice that he had let it slip. He needed to get out of it somehow. Meanwhile, our hero cheerfully asked if Onaga wanted him to deal with his master. Then there would be no problems. The man stiffened and turned to leave, claiming that he had no idea what the young man was talking about. The commissar walked towards Mochiyama, who was starting to panic from excitement. While Fumiya approached Makoto Yaimori, the guy was holding a button in his hand. He looked at it carefully and sighed that he accidentally tore it off. Onaga grimaced again, unable to understand when the boy had managed to do this or why he was being provoked. The handcuffs closed around the cultivator's wrists, and he calmly announced that he would take something more substantial than a button from the commissioner next time. The man swore and threatened that our hero would regret that he allowed himself such impudent behavior. It was dark and gloomy in the cell, which wasn't exactly a good mood, but Makoto Yaimori wasn't here yet. Sitting on a bench with his back to the entrance was a man who, judging by the outline of his figure, was quite large and strong. One of the policemen tapped on the bars of his cell, saying that the order had arrived. Let him get ready. The man was reading a book. He didn't say anything to the fact that someone who should be eliminated would appear soon, but he flexed his muscles a little. Then, the bandit with burning eyes slammed the book shut and loudly said that the order was accepted. Everything was going according to plan. Our hero was brought into the room. He had never been in prison before and was now trying to look around. The lock clicked, the cell doors opened, and now Makoto Yamori was going to try out what a pre-trial detention cell was like. The guards stopped on either side of the entrance, and our hero slowly but quite confidently stepped inside. The young man immediately felt threatened and simply asked for what purpose they decided to attack him. He began to look at what was inside. It looked quite interesting. It seems that they had already prepared for the newcomer's visit. Looking at the big bald man who had slammed the book shut but hadn't attacked yet, Makoto Yamori initially thought that this was the leader. Without letting go of the folio, the bandit said that he would never have laid a finger on such a child as our hero before. He has always had principles that should not be violated. But still, money is now a priority. Funaki Masanari hired him to kill the guy. And even if such an opponent is of no interest to him, but the reward is too tempting. The goon stood up and began to stretch his arms, asking the young man to do him a favor and not fight back. It didn't make any sense anyway. Makoto Yamori frowned, realizing that this was not the main character at all. He asked if it was really another 6 in front of him, so it wasn't interesting. As soon as the guy entered the cell, he felt a slight burning sensation. There could be no mistake, it was chi. But if a bandit knows how to handle spiritual energy, then there are also masters in this world. This was a surprise. The fight promised to be interesting. The bully loomed over Makoto, who was sure that the student was simply petrified with fear and unable to move. With words that would finish him off in 1 second, the man swung to deliver his killing blow. However, his hand seemed to pass through the air without reaching the target. The big man almost fell to the floor due to inertia. He cursed, trying to figure out what kind of joke this was. Nothing like this had ever happened before. At this time, Makoto Yamori's hand was placed on his face. The young man reported that his opponent seemed to have messed up something. The hero noticed that the only weakling here is not him at all. So it's time to update the information a little. With that, the cultivator slammed the bandit's head against the wall with all his strength, almost smashing it into the next cell. The blow was incredible, but did not cause much damage to the opponent. He immediately reached out and grabbed our hero by the leg. The assassin's eyes were burning with a surge of chi, and he swung it, lifting Makoto Yamori off the ground as if he weighed nothing at all. The throw was impressive. The guy hit the wall, flying through the entire camera head down. His enemy was satisfied, but the cultivator wasn't so bad either. He was on his feet in a second and took up a defensive stance. The bandit grinned and noticed that this pathetic student was not so simple. It was time to show him what real pain is. Makoto Yamori continued to stand quietly and look at his enemy. He was sure that he was not a particular threat. Enveloping himself in ki, our hero rushed into the attack with lightning speed, not giving the bandit the opportunity to put up a protective block. He raised his arm to strike and moved so fast that the big man didn't have time to get his bearings at all and just stood there. A series of punches knocked the man back like a rag doll, and he fell, thinking that he had never met anyone so fast before. The impact against the cell wall was much stronger this time, and the killer's ribs cracked and he gritted his teeth in pain. Blood spurted from his mouth, and the bandit swore obscenely, asking where the kid's strength came from and why everyone thought he was weak. Instead of answering, the young man made a jump, intending to attack from above. This frightened his opponent, who even tried to press himself to the floor. But the big man was ready for this attack, so he put out his hands to parry the blow and not take as much damage as last time. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, it didn't help. The cultivator kicked it so hard that it didn't matter if it was blocked or not. The dust hadn't settled yet, but the guy had already landed on his feet and was peering ahead to see what condition his opponent was in. He was crippled, but alive and very angry, not stopping swearing dirty. The bully still tried to get up. This was done quite quickly and without any problems. The man immediately made an attack. Rage literally overwhelmed him. However, the speed was too slow. Our hero just watched as the big man's fist approached his face and waited for the right moment. He dodged with lightning speed and counterattacked his fist into the enemy's solar plexus. It was a very powerful blow. Blood and curses poured out of the bandit's mouth, and it seemed that Makoto Yamori wasn't lying when he called him a weakling, at least in comparison. The man collapsed to the floor, smashing through part of the wall. Rocks flying into the air like a bomb had gone off. Clutching his torso, the killer tried to stand up, but he couldn't, and all he had to do was continue swearing. When the man managed to get to his feet, he could hardly see anything. His head was spinning and everything around him was blurry. But the enemy was already there. The young man launched another attack, but he remained completely calm, his only goal being to get more information out. He slammed the big man's face into the floor, smashing through the structure, and it was now quite obvious who would be the winner in this confrontation. Pressing his head to the remains of the floor, the guy said that it was time to have a heart-to-heart conversation. He wanted to hear everything, and in detail. He pushed so hard that the bandit simply didn't have a chance to respond, so he had to loosen his grip a little. Our hero was interested in who sent the assassin, but most of all, where he got such a large amount of spiritual chi energy. In his office, Onage began to call someone, and at the very beginning of the conversation, he was informed that Makoto Yamori was a real monster. The commissar was very surprised, saying that this was an ordinary student, a weakling who was kicked out of the Yamori clan. What could have gone wrong? The person on the other side of the line tried to explain something, but Onage ordered the young man to be eliminated without any fuss, and by any means necessary. Hoshimoto promised to appoint a police officer as the head of the 3rd precinct, and the commissioner, with burning eyes, asked him not to forget this when everything was done. Meanwhile, the guy had found a chair somewhere and sat down across from the assassin, who remained silent. Finally, the bandit said that he greatly underestimated the student. The guy is clearly not a match for ordinary mortals, but such as him, a worthy opponent. Makoto Yamori became wary as he realized that there seemed to be other cultivators in this world, which was a real discovery for him. The man explained that a couple of years ago he met an old monk in Ryugia. He was a very unusual person. The monk gathered the chi energy in his palms and split the wood like a splinter, something the bandit had never seen before. His jaw literally dropped, and the fighter decided that by all means he should find out how this is possible and learn how to do the same. The monk did not reveal all the secrets, but still gave the man a bottle of some special water charged with chi energy. For several years, the bully drank this water a few drops a day, diluted with ordinary water, and his body strengthened so much that it went beyond human capabilities. Makoto Yamori had decided that there was a spring of concentrated spiritual water in Ryuja, so all he had to do was find it. Springs arise where there is a high density of spiritual chi energy. On the Luke continent, even a drop of such liquid was worth its weight in gold. It could help in cultivation. Our hero asked the bandit why he continues to work as a mercenary for ordinary people, when he himself has long surpassed them in development. The man replied that his son has amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, and the bills for treatment are simply huge. You need to use every opportunity to get money. He shouted that you can't blame the father for wanting to save the child, he just has to earn money for treatment. The spiritual water did not work, only keeps him alive. Makoto Yamori thought about it. He roughly imagined what kind of disease it was and was sure that it could help the bully. Well, whether it should be done, the question is. Finally, he sighed and said that he would save his son. Hearing this, the man turned pale and asked why to joke so much. The guy explained that spiritual water is a real poison for an ordinary mortal. In the diluted form of chi you can still use, but never in pure form. However, if you know a special technique, you can give chi certain properties, for example healing, as he did in his talismans. The bandit was indignant that he had never heard of any chi, and in general doubts that any piece of paper can have such power. The cultivator then pointed his talisman at the mercenary, and the entire area was lit up with a bright green glow. The man looked at his hand in surprise. The wound healed literally before his eyes. It was just incredible. Makoto Yamori glared at the big man and offered him a choice. Either turn in the customer and heal his son, or die right here and now. It was clear from his face that this was not a joke, and any of the options that the bandit chose would be fulfilled. The man sighed and replied that he knew that this person was not a student, and in general, not an ordinary person. He said that he was contacted by Hoshimoto Kusei, but whether he is the main customer is not clear. Everyone called him Mr. Kusei, and right now, the young man was surprised to tell someone that Onage wasn't nearly as good, afraid of some small thing from Yamori. Club owner Kausen ended the conversation and offered to pick up where they left off with a smile. Still beaming, Kusei asked what kind of meat the guest wanted to eat now, or if she wanted a drink. In front of him sat a chained brunette with her mouth taped shut, her eyes expressing outright horror. The girl was crying. The man laughed that the bad girl had completely forgotten about the rules of etiquette. It was indecent to refuse a treat. He smiled and held up a finger, noticing that he needed a moment to think about how to get out of this situation. Suddenly, Kausen jumped up to the beauty and in one movement tore the tape from her mouth. He did it very sharply and rudely. The bastard took a pair of forceps and asked her which tooth he should pull out next, so that the girl would learn her lesson. Without waiting for an answer, he immediately got down to business. The unfortunate brunette had about half a tooth row left in her mouth. As he finished the torture and was drying his hands on a towel, an attendant came in and reported that Mr. Sumo had called for Yamori's account. The master replied that there was no need to worry about it. He had already sent a person from Ryugia on a mission, and he was going to stop by the station himself. With a kind of indescribable pleasure, Kusei announced that Makoto Yamori was already dead anyway. The scoundrel was wrong. Our hero was the most alive of all the living. Just at this moment, his cellmate was thanking him for the talisman. The would-be assassin gave the guy a cross with concentrated spiritual liquid. It was a generous gift. He looked at the capsule. If you water the grass, it will instantly ripen, and you can prepare chi-gathering pills to ascend to the second stage of cultivation. Makoto sincerely thanked the thug for helping him out a lot, then hid the treasure in his inner pocket. The goon was not too enthusiastic. He warned the young man that now Hoshimoto would come for him. He added with disgust that those Kusei had his eye on didn't live long, so he should be careful. Makoto Yamori said that he would try to protect the man if necessary, and let him not worry about him. Then the hero added that regarding Hoshimoto, he will definitely send greetings to the scoundrel personally in the near future. Meanwhile, a luxury yellow sports car pulled up to the Numi University building. The equally gorgeous Shizuru Suga came out of it, and she was very surprised that the guy who sold her talismans was the same Junior Yaimori. After looking at the lists again, she decided that it couldn't be a coincidence and then went to the administrative building. She decided to ask Uncle Jin in the administration office about Hiroto-kun's group and rushed up the stairs to the entrance. In Jin Mochiyama's office, Saki was already familiar to us. She was talking about the Yakuza. The rector shouted that he should not get involved in such matters so as not to ruin his reputation. The girl was crying. Kumori's secretary Hina tried to comfort her, but to no avail. Suga shouted that the university should intervene. Yamori was kidnapped. The police are also on the case. The doors opened and the girls looked back. Shizuru was standing on the threshold. Her appearance was a pleasant surprise. She heard part of the conversation and clutched at the necklace around her neck, starting to feel nervous as everyone in the office was talking about Makoto Yaimori, her benefactor. In the commissioner's office, the inspector was indignant. He slammed his hand on the table and shouted that you can't just let go of the Scar Gang. They had been hunting them for several years. When Haruka indignantly declared that this was an abuse of authority, he would take appropriate action. Aonaga asked the Edge what evidence he could provide. Insulting a senior officer is a serious crime. The guy was not intimidated by this statement. He leaned over to the boss and said that he knew what kind of things he was doing behind everyone's back. The man grimaced viciously and offered to voice it, and the inspector ground his teeth in disgust, knowing that this would be a mistake. Just then, the office doors burst open and two girls rushed in, shouting for Onaga to let go of Makoto Yamori immediately. The duty officer apologized, saying that he could not restrain them, which caused a wave of anger in his address from the commissioner. The man took a cigarette and began to wonder who they were. The kids should not have had any connections, so the visitors are not too influential. Onaga lit a cigarette and said that their friend was suspected of robbery and assault, and the police couldn't just let him go. Krya shouted that this was complete nonsense. Since when did Makoto face such charges? The man said that he was the head of the department and therefore was not obliged to disclose such information. Mochiyama clenched her fists and asked why there are no Yakuza here. If our hero was arrested, then they should be taken into custody, otherwise it's corruption. The commissioner argued that he did not have to answer to them. If they continued to push, they would be arrested for obstruction of justice. Shizuru silently put her phone down on the table and said that she should try it if she had the guts, then sat down confidently in the chair, crossing her legs. The commissioner snapped his fingers and gave orders to arrest the visitors and take them to a cell to think about their behavior. 2 policemen went to Mochiyama, 2 more to Shizuru, who continued to sit quietly, swinging her leg. Onaga announced that the girls were arrested as accomplices in the crimes of Makoto Yaimori, and he was incredibly malicious. When Haruka was removed from the case for harboring a criminal and immediately sent for questioning, the inspector shouted that this was an outrage. Shizuru calmly asked what Director Ogi would think if Onaga made things up for everyone indiscriminately. The commissioner laughed, saying that such wording only further aggravates the girl's guilt. It is an impudence and an insult to a civil servant. Pretty Girl continued after noticing that someone was doing too many favors for Onaga, so it wouldn't be like that anymore. The man stiffened and looked at her carefully, then replied that now was not the time to complicate things. Shizuru asked if this meant that the matter of Maruto Yaimori could also be covered up with a tidy sum. Onaga took a drag on his cigarette and said that powerful people have their own privileges. Such is the fate of her friend, and she herself is no exception. The man said that after the attack, the police desperately resisted, because no one will be upset if the police report that everyone here died because of police resistance. This threat startled Haruka and Mochiyama, their eyes widening in horror and indignation, as if their boss had crossed the line. Shizuru calmly asked if Director Ogi had heard what Commissioner Onaga had just said. A cheerful voice came from the phone, assuring the young lady that he had heard every word perfectly, and the police officers gave a cry of surprise. The commissioner panicked, unable to believe that the person on the other end of the line was actually the same director of the Ogi. Shizuru asked if she should introduce herself, and then stated that Onaga was accused of having links to an organized criminal group, abuse of authority, and threats to the family of a member of the ride board. When the scoundrel heard that he was suspended and to be questioned, and that Ogi was coming here, he trembled and finally asked who was in front of him. Shizuru gave her name and family, saying that this should have been the beginning of their dialogue. But the planets were different. Onaga couldn't understand how someone from the most powerful Shuga family could be related to some pathetic student. Meanwhile, in Makoto's cell, Yamori wasted no time trying to figure out what to do with the cross. There was quite a bit of liquid in the tank on the decoration. You had to use it wisely. Apparently, this amount is only enough for one time, so our hero decided to act very carefully. Suddenly, footsteps were heard. Realizing that someone was coming here, the guy became alert. Then he realized that this someone was wearing heels and calmed down a little. Shizuru walked almost the entire corridor and almost reached the bars of the cell where Yakuto was sitting. But most of all, the young man was surprised by the fact that the girl had keys in her hands and she opened the door without any difficulty. Then the footsteps of another person were heard. Our hero expected that it would be the police who wanted to interfere with the beauty. To his relief, Saki Mochiyama appeared behind Shizuru and happily called out to Makoto Yamori, saying that it was a long time no see. Meanwhile, Kusei was smashing expensive vases with a golf club, shouting that all his minions were absolutely useless. He sat down and began to mumble that one was rotting in a cell, the other was dying. They were useless. You always had to solve problems yourself. The scoundrel growled that if the Ama clan's order wasn't carried out, then his head would immediately fly off his shoulders. Koshimoto's eyes shone with anger and despair. He didn't like it when his own life was threatened. The bodyguard behind him asked what his master planned to do if there would be any new orders. The young man stood up and said that he would use his best piece to try to capture Yamori alive to prove his loyalty to the Ama clan. Kusei angrily declared that he would deal with this garbage with his own hands. He had created too many problems. Meanwhile, our hero was at home and watching some stupid TV show. He was not in a very rosy mood. The young man had spent every penny of his money on materials and ingredients and was now completely broke. But it didn't matter, because it was now possible to concoct pills. Judging by the bright glow, everything was successful. Soon, Makoto Yamori was putting a cute yellow ball in his mouth to test its properties. The guy thought that even if it was a crude method, he just squeezed the dirty natural chi more tightly. But for this world it will do. The power is incredible. With the words that he had now reached the second stage of cultivation, the young man literally disappeared into thin air. He appeared as if out of nowhere right in the next room, and the dog squealed and whined loudly in surprise. The cultivator was satisfied. It had been a long time since he had used the cloud shadow step technique, and even a bullet couldn't hit him at this speed. He spent all the money, spirit liquid and ingredients. Funaki said that there is a spring in Ryugia, but for now, you can think of something in the city to advance further. The hero decided to use the connections of the one the bully was talking about. He took out a business card and dialed the number. But if the entrance fee is really 2 million, he will not get anything. Makoto Yamori shot down the challenge. His attention was drawn to an advertisement for Shugao beauty injections, which promised youth in one shot. Cheerful Beauties reported that just for almost 40,000 yuan, anyone can look no worse. This is the lowest price in history. Our hero realized that women in this world are literally obsessed with youth and beauty. He took out a beautiful box to put one pill in it. The idea was born spontaneously, but it turned out to be very successful. The guy decided to attend a social event and attach his miracle remedy there for a tidy sum. In fact, he had already been invited to the ball by Shizuru, Councilman Shuga's daughter, who had dined with Makoto Yaimori 5 hours ago. Thanks to her father's connections, the girl was on good terms with her superiors and the government, and it was not surprising that she managed to get him out of prison. But at dinner, the beauty behaved easily and at ease, completely not bragging about her position in society. This appealed to the guy, who also ate with pleasure, completely without hesitation. The conversation was very pleasant. Suddenly, Shizuru asked if he knew about the building where the office of a large cosmetics concern is located, and the hero nodded. The girl explained that the building belongs to her family, and tomorrow there will be a reception and banquet in honor of her mother's recovery. Hearing that she was asking him to come too, Makoto Yaimori was literally dumbfounded. At first, this idea scared him a little. Still, at the appointed time, he arrived at the designated Sugao skyscraper, where several windows were lit up, and the ball had already started on the top floor. Luxuriously dressed people were enjoying drinks and wine, some of them making small talk, others just looking around. It didn't occur to the cultivator to get a nicer suit. He came as he was, but he didn't forget to bring the pill box. It was a Juyan pill, and on the Luke continent, female cultivators would swallow it in batches. But on Earth, such a pill could make a splash and bring in a couple of million. This is exactly how the young man was going to earn money, only it was necessary to correctly advertise the tool. Makoto Yaimori carefully looked around the room and found an ugly woman. Such a chance was simply not to be missed. Hoshisu Eno and Hoshisu Shiro, Shizuru's uncle and aunt, greeted the guests. They advised the said woman to get married quickly. The clock is ticking. Hoshisu Masami lowered her head sadly. She was well aware that with her appearance, finding a fiancé wasn't easy even with her connections. Hoshiso Sura laughed that she might finally miss her chance and become completely useless to the clan. The girl tried to justify herself, but couldn't find the right words to answer, causing another wave of ridicule. Shizuru's mother stood up for the woman, ordering her brother to stop immediately, and Masami raised them all after her mother's death. His uncle's eyes flashed with fire, and he decided to remind his sister that he had already looked for a profitable match for Shizuru for a long time. It should also benefit the family. The girl's mother coughed with excitement. She had a special contract with her brother, which her daughters had not yet been told about. Meanwhile, Hoshisu asked about marrying the Ocho clan, which seems like a great idea to him. Meanwhile, Masami proudly replied that she had her own opinion on the matter. It seems that she has already mastered her emotions. This bold performance only caused the man to let out a loud sigh and then burst out laughing. When he had finished laughing, he began to yell angrily that a woman should not be selfish. He did not advise her to voice her opinion. He glared at Masami and asked her if she really hoped to regain her youth with their lousy makeup. Then our hero realized that his finest hour had come and loudly announced that he could do it without makeup. Then the guy added that it was still possible to speak more respectfully about a huge concern with world fame. Our hero asked Hoshisu to watch his words, and he will now show how much a woman can change. The man was surprised by this audacity and, sweating with anger, asked who this guy was in general. Uncle Shizuru started calling for security, but no one was in a hurry to respond to his call. Everyone just stood there and watched. Finally, her uncle's bewilderment began to strain her, and she introduced Makoto Yaemori, the benefactor who had saved her mother. The woman gently took the guy by the hand and loudly thanked him for the talisman that cured the disease. Our hero smiled and replied that it was an honor for him to do a good deed for such a beautiful person. Meanwhile, Hoshisu blew his nose into a handkerchief, muttering that they were being cheated like suckers instead of medicine. They believed in trinkets. Makoto Yaemori apologized for not introducing himself, as he is a researcher specializing in time and energy and a business partner of Shuga. This information surprised Shizuru a little as she tried to figure out what kind of game the young man was playing. The uncle asked what nonsense, what business the guy might have in their circle, to which the hero replied that now they are discussing the effect of cosmetics on the appearance of women. He showed the box and said that right now he was ready to demonstrate how easily you can return youth and beauty. There was a mocking exclamation from behind that the trick was going to be even more interesting this time. Makoto Yaemori asked Masami to extend her hand, and Masami looked at him quizzically and quietly asked why she was the one. The guy replied that only she was here worthy of taking the remedy from this box. It is miraculous. With these words, the hero opened the box. The glow from it was reflected in the eyes of the stunned woman. Yaemori explained that this is the Juyin pill and it is a true source of youth and beauty. Hoshisu shouted that it was time to stop listening to this nonsense. There was no doubt poison in the box. Masami hesitantly clarified if it was definitely not poison, and she could take this pill without fear of consequences. Shizuru said with a smile that Makoto was completely trustworthy, and if her aunt didn't want to, she could take the medicine herself. The girl's mother supported her and said that she also agreed to take a pill to support her daughter and sister. Everyone around them was laughing and talking skeptically about the fact that there are no elixirs of youth in the world. This is a stupid diluent. Our hero went up to Masami and asked her in her ear if she really didn't want to be young and beautiful again, as before. She remembered all the mockery about appearances, which had become unbearable in recent years. The woman frowned and whispered that the guy was right. She really wanted to return to her former beauty and lightness. Aunt Shizuru squeezed her eyes shut and brought the pill to her lips. It was obvious that she was very, very scared. The surrounding people froze in horror. No one could believe that Masami actually dared to swallow something from the hands of a stranger. The woman stood and looked at her hands. Nothing happened. Everyone around whispered that this was really a divorce. Hoshisu laughed and exclaimed that he was right when he said it was a hoax. You can't trust a quack researcher. Suddenly, a bright yellow glow began to envelop Masami, and her eyes and hair gradually began to change. A second later, the woman was beautiful and young again, as if the last 15 years of her life had never happened. Instantly, one of the attendants brought a mirror and invited the heroine to look at herself. The woman gasped. She was young and beautiful again. Everyone who was skeptical of the pill experienced a real shock. No one would have dared to think that Masami was once such a beauty and could become one again. Immediately, a woman flew up to our hero and asked how much the pill cost. She also needed it. Makoto replied that the price was 400,000, but he only had 10 pieces with him. Then the woman offered 60,000, but those who wanted to buy the product for 1 million and even 1.5 million yuan already ran to the young man. Uncle Shizuru couldn't believe his eyes. The people around him were literally going crazy over some kind of pill. Makoto Yaemori held up his hand with the pills and shouted that the real secret to good purification was that if the researchers came up with a method, it would bring down the entire market. Hoshisu said that he needed to get the distribution rights to the product, and his companion gasped that then the cosmetics company would go down. The man said that if it was profitable to marry off Shizuru and get hold of Ocho's money, they would be able to make a fortune from these pills. Immediately, some fat guy offered our hero 4 million for the rights. He also decided to rake in the heat while it was hot. Behind his back, the bespectacled man said that the Rinka Group was offering $20 million for the same thing, and it looked like the banquet was turning into an auction. Then the uncle stepped forward and ordered everyone to calm down. Lord Makoto Yaemori is a guest of his niece and wants to rest. Then, with a smile, he turned to the young man and invited him to sit down at his table. Then the man quietly added that his firm was offering $30 million and offered to divide the rights by 30 and 70%. The guy asked how much to whom. If he was 70%, then the agreement could well take place. The man asked not to be stupid. Yamori will get 30%. But with the connections of his clan, they will be able to ascend to the heavens. Then Shizuru intervened in the conversation and asked what kind of connections the Hoshisu clan has, what it carries. Uncle Scared asked the girl to follow the language. They are a family. Let it not interfere with business. His niece pointed out how he had spent $160 million mortgaging his grandmother's company. But had he really thought too much about his family back then? Shiro Hoshisu was sweating profusely, but he still invited Mr. Makoto Yaemori to continue talking about business. Shizuru showed her phone number and said that Ocho's bank was withdrawing its funds. The bank was sending demands, and she could continue the list of claims indefinitely. The girl's mother almost fell out of her chair and shouted that her brother had no right to mortgage their family business. The man, sweating profusely, asked how Shizuru had found out about this, if she had really gone through the accounting department, or if she had done something else. The girl crossed her arms over her chest and instead of answering, asked why he was here. He wanted to rob his sister to the skin, as he probably already did with his grandmother. She angrily declared that she would not give her uncle a single yuan. Let him forget that he had a family. Shizuru ended up saying that Shiro Hoshisu doesn't have more than the $3 million he promised Makoto Yaemori, so he's the only one lying. The man fell to his knees and rested his head on the floor with sobs. Then he raised his face to his niece and tearfully whined that she was wrong. When Shiro didn't get the reaction he expected, he turned to his sister, who also said that she had only transferred the rights to the company to him because his brother had promised to change. He kept begging for help, this time from Masami, who is the only male heir in the Hoshisu family. The woman replied that she could turn a blind eye to his selfishness, but she could not forgive the embezzlement of her mother's property and the loss of the company. She spun around and shoved her brother away, telling him that he needed to sort out his own shit without help. Shiro Hoshisho blinked in shock, unable to believe that both of his sisters had actually given up on him. Then Shizuru came forward and said that she could give her uncle one last chance, let him make the right decision. Either he would go to court for embezzlement and debt and go to jail, or he would sell her the company for 1 yuan, even though he could have saved this sinking ship for nothing. Everyone around them giggled approvingly that the man deserved such an attitude with his stupidity and impudence. Meanwhile, the girl turned to Makoto Yaemori and said with a smile that there are real pros here who are much more pleasant to discuss business with. She suggested that the young man introduce him to the right people, but he did not express much enthusiasm about this. Shizuru added that 40 million would be a fair price, and Omu would have to keep at least 80% of the shares, but he should be careful. These people are vultures. The guy replied that it was true, but in matters relating to business, he fully trusts her opinion. The beauty remained standing with an instructive finger raised. At the end of the banquet, the girl drove Makoto Yaemori home in her yellow car, and she really did her best to thank the hero for saving her mother. She praised the house, and our hero replied that the house was rented, but he was very grateful to her for the compliment, and for the help, and for giving her a lift to the house. The beauty replied that it was not necessary to thank them. They were friends. This word literally touched the young man to the quick, but Shizuru was beaming and held out her hand to him, once again asking if she was right to consider him a friend. They said their goodbyes, and the guy went to the entrance. His girlfriend got into the car, preparing to go back to her place. The cultivator looked up at the moon in the sky and found himself thinking that this kind of life wasn't so bad. He was starting to like the new world. Makoto Yaemori stopped in front of the front door. For some reason, he didn't want to go inside. The hand froze, still not opening it. But after a few seconds, the guy still unlocked the lock and looked inside. The light from the street illuminated part of the carpet. The dog's paws were visible, but for some reason it did not hurry to meet its owner. Having opened the door completely, our hero noticed with horror that the animal was lying in a pool of blood, and a knife was sticking out of its stomach. Yaemori was mad with anger. The only thought that pulsed in his brain was that it shouldn't be like this. A guy was on the phone telling Mr. Kusei that Makoto had returned home and was accompanied by a woman who appeared to be his mistress. Meanwhile, the young man rushed to the pet in the hope that it could still be saved. The dog could survive. The pool of blood was very large and indicated otherwise, yet the young man took out his weapon and took out a healing talisman. He brought it up to the animal. Streams of green light began to envelop the wounded beast, but Yaemori managed to make it in time. One of the bandits was assigned to capture Shizura. The second one was hiding in the house to attack our hero. He was busy healing the dog and did not pay attention to the fact that an attack was being prepared from above. At least he didn't show any signs of it, but when the dagger almost hit the target, Makoto Yaemori reacted with lightning speed. The blade didn't harm him. A stream of energy swirled around the blade, and the weapon literally tore out of the assassin's hands as if it were alive. The bandit's eyes widened in horror. Not only did he miss the target, but he risked running into his own knife. Grabbing the dog, who was now fine, in his arms, the cultivator kicked out and his opponent began to fall. After the second blow, the man called for backup, but the rest of the mercenaries were confused, not knowing how to capture the guy alive when he did this. Our hero asked the pet to hide somewhere while he dealt with this problem, and assured that everything would be fine. He looked at the unconscious assassin, trying to determine how serious his accomplices might be. Realizing that none of them possessed chi, Makoto Yamori turned to the enemy and said that he was very much looking forward to their attack. I didn't have to repeat it twice. The bandits rushed to the attack. Someone shouted that the victim can be swept away, but you don't need to kill. The first stab of the knife landed in nowhere. The cultivator easily dodged, and his opponent began to fall. The second one was going to get a face grab followed by a punch to the floor. The numerical advantage didn't really affect the situation. The throw was so strong that the guy's face left a hole in the tile. Pieces of it flew in all directions. Two more bandits froze in fear. They didn't dare approach the monster that the frail and harmless student had turned into. Makoto Yamori looked at the others and said slowly that the others would go after the first and second ones soon. Another bandit decided to attack with a baton, thinking that the guy was scared and threatened to stall for time. His punch did not reach the target in the same way as the attacks of his colleagues. Our hero just dodged back. He looked completely calm. Therefore, without thinking too much, he made a counterattack. The assassin screamed in pain, his arm taking on a very strange shape. With his other hand, the cultivator grabbed the enemy's neck, not to strangle them, but to lift them off the ground. Now he was dangling helplessly, not reaching the floor with his feet, and our hero loudly asked who wants to be next. He added that he would destroy them all one by one, but if someone is in a hurry to die, then let them come without waiting in line. The leader of the squad gave the order to shoot at the limbs. The bandits did not use firearms immediately, so as not to attract too much attention. But now it was inevitable. Makoto Yamori didn't wait for the bullets to hit him and rushed forward. The speed was appropriate. The young man said that he was not afraid of guns, so let the bandits get ready to die. But first he would make them tell who the customer was. Kusei made a practiced gesture of picking through the torture instruments neatly laid out on the napkin. Grabbing a scalpel, the scoundrel grinned and said that he expected to see an ordinary girl. And they brought such a beauty. Besides, from such a beautiful family, and all the men in the city dream of getting Shizura as a wife. He was very lucky. Kusei showed the blade to the girl and informed her that her daddy, Kenshi Suga, would obviously pay a lot of money to keep the baby in order. Just then, Hoshimoto's phone rang, and he was distracted by the call because he was waiting for a report on the capture of Makoto Yamori. The man accepted the call with a satisfied look and asked what was there. He really hoped that the guy was not killed prematurely. In response, they said that his people would not wake up again, and the bastard realized that he was not talking to a subordinate, but to our hero. Then Kusei said that the young man knows how to surprise, but he also has a special surprise prepared for him. He offered to guess who was next to him right now. A hint, her dad is a council member surnamed Shuga. Shizuru tried to call for help, and the guy realized that Hoshimoto wasn't bluffing. He really grabbed his girlfriend. He said in an iron tone that he was on his way to Kusei's, that he should let the girl go and not involve innocent people in this matter. In response, the man shouted that the damn brat made him laugh very well, but let him not even dream that Muga will remain intact. He shouted that he would give the young man 40 minutes to drive, and then he would slowly cripple the beauty. In the end, he suggested that Makoto Yamori search for his location by all means, because the right address is not known to many. The phone screen went blank, and our hero looked at him with a completely empty and lifeless gaze. Then he clenched his fingers and crushed the device, muttering that he was already going after Ho Chi Minh City and he would regret what he had done. The bandit, meanwhile, spread his hands and invited the girl to shoot a teaser for their future entertainment video. Suddenly, the doors to the room opened and two security guards reported that a fire alarm had gone off in the warehouse. Just before Shizuru's eyes closed, she heard Koisei go to the warehouse to check everything out in person, while the bodyguard stayed behind to guard her. The girl was unconscious for some time. She opened her eyes again because of the noise. The doors were knocked out by someone directly with the body of the guard. The captive tried to see who had come to her rescue, but her position did not allow her to get up properly. Lowering her head back down, Shizuru only whispered Makoto Yamori's name. She was sure it was him. An hour before the events described, the same mercenary from the cell arrived on a motorcycle to deliver a letter of recommendation, but no one opened it for him. Funuki checked the address again. It seemed that everything was correct. Then it is not clear why no one answers. The big man looked at Yamori's house once more. Apparently the guy just hadn't returned yet and couldn't hear the phone. Then he heard someone calling Hoshimoto and telling him that Makoto had returned home with some girl, and that the 6 mercenaries would be a surprise to him. The hooded man was reporting on the situation, describing in detail what they were going to do with our hero. He added that the woman they have already captured and will soon be delivered to the address. The boss cannot worry about anything. The bandit from the cell guessed that murderers were sent to the savior of his son, and even Shizura was kidnapped. When the car with the captive left, the goon did not think for a second what to do. He wanted to help Yamori. The man got on a motorcycle to see where the girl was being taken. and then report the coordinates to the cultivator. It was impossible to recognize him in the helmet, and the bandits did not expect that there might be a tail behind them, so they went straight to the boss. The road was not too long, and soon the kidnappers were already ringing the front doorbell of a nice mansion. When everyone came in, Funaki called Yaemori. This time, the guy accepted the call, hearing that his girlfriend was kidnapped by Kusei's people and the big guy followed them. He thanked him. Makoto then asked if the house was located at Houkai 22, and the big guy was very surprised that the hero already knew the location of Hoshimoto. When asked how he knew this, the guy said nothing. He had his own special methods. Yaemori looked down. He healed one of the mercenaries and tortured him until he leaked the information. The young man asked Funaki for a favor. Let him take care of the girl while Makoto drove here and personally sent Kause to hell. The big man nodded and quietly entered the mansion, just in time for the guards to knock on the door to report the situation in the warehouse. Their master began to resent that he ordered to cut off the fire alarm in the room. This should have been done immediately. He said that he would go and check everything himself, and let the security guard guard the girl and not let anyone inside. Left alone, the bandits began to whine about how difficult it was for them to earn their bread, and they were strictly forbidden to touch the woman inside. Funaki came around the corner and strode toward the guys. Hoshimoto he wouldn't have been able to beat, but these two were easy targets. They shouted that they couldn't go inside, but the thug had already activated his chi and was pointing at them, ignoring their protests. The man apologized in advance to the bald man for what he was about to do and asked him to be patient for a while. After that, he threw the guard against the doors with such force that he simply pushed them inside with his body. The path was clear and Funaki stepped inside resolutely. He was prepared for the guards to be there as well, but there was no one else in the room but Shizuru, and the bound girl called out to Yaemori, and the big man smiled as if he owed him a favor. He untied her and put her on his shoulder to carry her away as soon as possible before Kause returned. Since there were obviously other guards in the house, Funaki moved almost at a run, hoping very much to remain unnoticed. He reached for the door, deciding to use the car parked in the garden. There were no guards there. Everyone had gone to look at the warehouses. It turned out to be a mistake. Someone still noticed the abduction and immediately shot the bully in the leg. The man collapsed to the floor, and Shizuru fell with him, her hair flying up dramatically. Funaki tried to crawl to the door, but he already knew that they couldn't get out of here so easily, and Hoshimoto returned. The man with a satisfied face said that he simply had exceptional accuracy. And after all, it had been so long since he had held a gun in his hands, the bodyguard agreed. Thug couldn't understand why they'd come back so quickly, which completely ruined his escape plan. In the meantime, the scoundrel asked how the impudent man dared to walk around the house like this just under his nose. Funaki got up and laughed, greeting Mr. Hoshimoto as if nothing had happened, and complaining that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. Kusei threw back his head theatrically and laughed, remarking that today was just a great day. Everyone had come to visit so that he could kill them. With a completely mad face, the scoundrel said that he was literally bursting with impatience to start this pleasant activity. Funaki replied that it was all just nonsense. He would only have fun after he was defeated, and he assumed a fighting pose. Meanwhile, Makoto Yaemori had already arrived at the right address and was standing near the entrance, counting the guards. As he made his way to the entrance, the men bustled around and asked what the young man was doing there. There was no response. Our hero just walked forward in silence, accumulating the maximum amount of chi energy. Right in front of the gate, one of the guards tried to stop him, explaining that this is a private area and you cannot enter here. Instead of a greeting, he received an incredible punch to the face, and his glasses flew off his nose in an instant. The bodyguard himself flew off into the bushes, as if he had been hit not by a frail student, but by a high-speed train. The other guards came running up, armed with batons, but they didn't immediately get their bearings. The bandits tried to attack Yaemori, rushing at him one by one, but the guy just walked forward, swatting them away like flies. He threw the men aside with a single punch and continued to walk towards the entrance of the mansion. There was no need to exchange for small things. Someone got hit with a fist, someone with a foot, but the result in any case remained the same. The security was deactivated. After finishing the last one, the young man leaped straight to the door so that he could enter. Makoto Yaemori's only thought was that now Kusei would be responsible for everything, and it wasn't long before he died. Funaki, meanwhile, was fighting the bandits. He was already very battered. There were too many opponents. There were at least a dozen bodyguards lying on the floor. No wonder the big man was tired, and he was also injured. The big guy was already regretting getting involved in this business at all. He couldn't even save one girl. His self-esteem fell below the baseboard. Kusai snidely remarked that as soon as he finished with the man, he would send someone to pick up his wife and children, so that he would not be bored in the next world. The bastard enthusiastically announced that he would first cut people into small pieces, for reliability, so to speak. Funaki was about to say something, but then someone smashed the front doors to hell. The noise was incredible. Hoshimoto asked a little warily who was there. He had not expected this turn of events at all. When the dust settled down a little, a man's silhouette appeared in the doorway. It was Makoto Yaemori himself. Our hero gloomily reported that the Reaper had come, who would drag the scoundrel straight to hell. There are no options here. Funeki was pleased to see that his friend was a little late, and it would have been all over in a little while. The guy handed him a healing talisman and advised him to use it immediately, if he needed help. The man took the green piece of paper and mumbled in surprise that it worked just as well as the last one. Kusei, meanwhile, waved his gun and ordered the guards to kill the young man immediately. The bandits immediately started firing their guns, but Makoto was so fast that the bullets didn't reach the target. Bullets were completely useless against a second-stage cultivator who had mastered the cloud shadow technique. Quickly and decisively, he scattered the bandits with punches and kicks, and no one even had time to utter a single word. Kusei started to break out in a cold sweat, trying to figure out what kind of speed was so incredible. Makoto Yamori continued his progress through the hall, just a little more, and he would really be close to realizing his threat. The villain decided that he would not wait for the last moment but quietly merge before it was too late. He cautiously opened the door to slip into hiding, muttering under his breath that he was being set up. Contrary to expectations, our hero turned out not to be a trash or a frail student, but the greatest martial artist. Kusei ran to the entrance of the shelter and immediately shouted to be opened quickly. It was too dangerous to stay in the house. The doors remained closed, and the man began frantically typing in the password, his excitement causing him to mix up the numbers. The scoundrel cursed and tried again, but before he could fully enter the code, Makoto Yaimori was already very close. He threw one of the bodyguards into the wall just a meter away from his enemy, who began to panic. Trembling with fear, Kusei advised the young man to cool down a bit. He wouldn't be able to reach his patron anyway. There was no reaction, and then Koshimoto started yelling that he would give the guy a hint. His master's name is Ima. He wants him dead. Our hero said that this is the first time he has heard this name, so if he continues to fool around, he will soon regret it very much. The cultivator threatened that the villain would regret being born into the world if he didn't tell the whole story in full detail. Kusei shouted that Joe Ama was the clan's heir. They were planning a political marriage with the Amatani clan, and the guy was getting in the way. Makoto Yamori decided that this might be true. The previous owner of the body was related to Amatani. Koshimoto spread his hands and said that only the Ima clan could pull off something like this. And the hero had absolutely no chance against them. Having heard that this clan is full of masters, and Joe Ama himself is not a bast, so our hero was very interested. He asked if they were practicing cultivation, but Koshimoto didn't understand what they were talking about. But he started offering to put in a good word about the guy if he let him go. The villain continued to describe how valuable he was, which drove the cultivator literally mad. He didn't say anything, but he already knew that he couldn't take it for long. While the blonde spread his hands again and said that it was hard to overestimate his usefulness, Makoto Yaimori demonstrated what he thinks of Kusei's advantages with an excellent punch to the face. The attack was so powerful that the villain simply broke through the armored door, which he had previously tried in vain to open. With a loud roar, it crashed to the floor along with the wreckage, and the red-haired girl inside screamed in fright. When our hero saw what was inside the room, his face became harder than ever before. The guy was standing on the threshold with a short sword in his hand, and he couldn't bring himself to go inside. The sight was just shocking. These were girls chained up. They were half sitting on the floor in their underwear, covering their heads and faces with their hands, each wearing a metal collar with a chain around their necks. Makoto Yaimori's eyes flashed with righteous anger as he noticed that these captives could explain Kusei's true worth far better than he could. With that, the young man swung his sword in a sweeping motion, moving from one girl to the next. The hero immediately cut all the chains that held the beauties against the wall with one swing, and their eyes widened in surprise. After that, the guy just put his short sword next to the girls, as if hinting that he wouldn't mind at all if they used it. Saying that he lets the ladies do whatever they want with the bastard, Makoto Yaimori left the room. Kusei held up his hands in an attempt to defend himself and lamented that he was a valuable shot. He had money and opportunities. The brunette took the sword in her hand and tore the band-aid off her lips, saying that they didn't need his dirty money. Sending Koshimoto to hell was their only wish. The young man returned to Shizuru. She did not have serious injuries, but the girl was constantly losing consciousness from stress. Healing talismans were again useful. He warned Funaki that it was time for him to get out. The cops were coming here, and it wasn't wise to cross paths. And the big guy asked if the guy was sure that he could handle it on his own. The hero replied that he would return home as soon as he handed the girl over to the police. The bully noticed that now the guy knew what he wanted. I wonder how he will act next. Makoto Yaimori thought for a while, and then replied that he would find this Joe Ama first, and then just grind him and his entire family to dust. The very next day, our hero started training. He already did not miss a day, trying to strengthen this frail body. And now he was engaged with a new enthusiasm. Hoshimoto had been destroyed, but Ama was still nowhere to be found, so we had to push on with the search and finish him off quickly. The dog became alert. It seems that someone was approaching the entrance to the house, and the pet began to show alarm. Our hero went to the door, trying to figure out who could have come to him at such an inopportune time. It was already quite late. A man with a neat hairstyle, a black suit, and dark glasses appeared in the doorway, looking like a bodyguard. He handed Makoto Yaemori an envelope and a package, saying that he had brought them here on the instructions of President Shuga. The message says that it's time to get ready. I will come as soon as you are ready. The young man hadn't even read what Shizuru had written in the letter yet. He couldn't understand where they were going or what the girl meant in general. The guy called the beauty and said that he had received her message but did not understand why she also sent him an expensive suit. She explained that they were going to the reception. The Hoshikawa family invited Shizura, and the girl decided to take Makoto Yaemori with her as a companion. These people run the largest pharmaceutical group in the city, so it would be a great success to sell Juyan pills to them. The beauty added that his ex-fiancée will also be at the event, and our hero was surprised to clarify who he was talking about. Then his brain pulled up the memories of his body's past, and the young man clearly realized that he was talking about Amatama Yuki. The image of her lingered in my body's memories, very hazy, but surprisingly beautiful and romantic. The Hoshikawa family's reception was a lavish ball, and everyone was shouting about the untold wealth of the clan. Shizuru was quietly telling her companion who was who, and the first people they met were Mr. Pierce, the CEO of Ace Group, and Mr. Akai Taro, the chairman of Kentaka Group. After hearing that they were both influential figures in business, our hero asked if they also wanted to establish a business relationship with Hoshikawa. Beauty was surprised to see that even though Makoto came from a powerful family, he didn't fully understand the power of clans and the value of connections. She said with a smile that once someone became related to Amatani, everyone would go out of their way to get into the social circle. As for the young lady Amatani who just entered the hall, those who want to make friends can simply be mowed with a scythe. Just at these words, the mentioned person entered the hall and people nearby began to whisper about it. Yuki followed behind the head of the Hoshikawa clan, a woman whose age was completely impossible to determine by eye. There were waves of bluish light around Amatani, but they were fairly neat, and there was no rage in her. Makoto Yaemori was surprised to see how much chi there was around the former fiancé of the owner of this body. Amatani Setsu Yuki was the heir to her clan, and Nana Hoshikawa, the head of the Hoshikawa family, was very protective of her. The cultivator realized that there were people in this world who knew how to handle chi, but they clearly had their own special methods. The girl did not even try to hide her spiritual energy, and it seemed to our hero's stupid self-confidence. He decided that he would ask the beauty about Amy later, because she must know something. Shizuru hurried over to say hello, and told Aunt Nana with a smile that she looked absolutely gorgeous. The woman smiled and asked about the health of the heroine's mother. She is glad that the heavens favor her, and the disease has receded. The beauty thanked for her participation and said that her mother is already on the mend. They are doing well. Shizuru handed Nana the Juyan pill, saying that it was their latest development. Let the beauty of a woman never fade. Hoshikawa looked delighted, but only asked if it was really the most sensational remedy. Everyone was whispering that this newest pill was worth a lot of money, even though it hadn't even gone on sale yet. Yuki Amatani's face showed that she didn't expect to see the magic drug with her own eyes either. Hoshikawa took the pill in her hands and stated that its quality is incredibly high. The one who created the tool is a real master. She added that she had met many alchemy masters, but there wasn't even a corresponding school in the city, so who was the author of this incredible tool? The girl said that the pill was created by her friend and business partner, and then introduced Makoto Yaemori. Nana and Yuki's faces became extremely surprised. At first, they didn't pay attention to Shizuru's companion, but now that they heard the name, they were simply amazed. Hoshikawa said that she had nursed the boy when he was a child, but she had never imagined that he would grow up to be so successful. She added that the Yaemori clan didn't seem to appreciate talent at all, which annoyed Amatani, who rebuked her aunt. The girl said that in noble families, such skills are not valued at all. All they are interested in is the level of cultivation. Otherwise, the woman would have been accepted into the Amatani clan as an elder long ago, but that didn't happen. The young man realized that his guess was correct. In this world, some clans have the art of cultivation, although their skills are far from the level of the Loot continent. Yuki added that such skills were useless for someone with Makoto's status, and Nana sighed and confirmed that this was indeed the case. Still, the woman wondered who the hero's mentor was and who taught him how to make such pills. This question brought back a wave of memories from the past. Not from that body, but from his life on the Luke continent. It was the mentor who betrayed the cultivator, and the memory of it was painful and unpleasant for him. So Makoto Yaemori replied that he didn't have a mentor. It was just a hobby that grew into something more. The guy wanted to ask a question about Ama, but then two more young men came up to them and began to congratulate Aunt Nana on her birthday. Moreover, the gentleman began to do this from afar, forcing the cultivator to turn around and see who was heading towards them. People around whispered that this was the heir of the Ama family, so the question was no longer relevant in the blink of an eye. My aunt was surprised to say that she hadn't expected Joe to come to her party either, and she looked a little scared. Makoto Yaimori couldn't believe that his enemy, the man who had ordered his murder, was standing a meter away. Meanwhile, Joe Ama spread his arms and said that Yuki would be offended if he didn't come to Aunt Nana's party. Then the guy squinted at Shizura and curiously asked who she was. He looked interested. Hoshikawa was pleased to introduce Mr. Shuga's daughter and was pleased to be able to recommend such a beautiful girl. Aim's face became a little sly and he didn't say that he was glad to meet you, but just nodded and said that he thought so. Then he remembered the rules of etiquette and extended his hand, introducing himself as the Soma clan's heir and giving his name. When the young man shook hands, he ambiguously stated that he had heard a lot about this beauty, and then squeezed his fingers harder than decency allowed. Then he looked at Makoto Yaimori and shook his hand as well, asking who it was, even though the answer seemed to be already known. The guy thought that it was stupid to pretend that he didn't know his name. I wonder how long the enemy will break the comedy? Hoshimoto said that Ama Joe was a cultivator, but now there were no traces of chi. Our hero identified himself and showed a little ki energy to put all the dots over I. He channeled his chi into the enemy's channels, so it was possible to identify the cultivator, even if he was trying to hide his abilities, which struck Makoto. Joe's meridians were completely empty, and there was absolutely no way to detect any traces of chi possession, which left him baffled. Meanwhile, Ima took back his hand and asked how Mr. Makoto Yaimori was doing. He rubbed his wrist and said he was glad to meet the young man, even though he hadn't expected to see him at the reception. Then Joe turned to Yuki as if nothing had happened and asked how the evening was going, and she must be having a lot of fun without him. Makoto continued to stare at his opponent and couldn't understand what was going on. It all looked very strange. He still couldn't detect any chi fluctuations. Could Joe Ama really be just an ordinary person? Even after hearing his name, the enemy didn't show any killing intent. A cultivator would have immediately detected such fluctuations in energy. The banquet continued, and everyone took their proper places at the tables and began serving hot and main dishes. Everyone was enjoying the meal and socializing, as if the people gathered here had forgotten all about business. But they weren't. Soon afterward, the manager announced that there would be a dance session after dinner, so let the audience take their time to go home. So it happened. After the meal, the Lord began to invite girls and women to dance, and music began to sound. Meanwhile, Makoto Yaimori continued to feel uneasy about being tricked, and Joe Ama wasn't a cultivator at all. It only remained to understand why and for what purpose. To solve this problem was not as easy as it might seem at first glance. Our hero decided to think about it later, but for now, pay a little attention to Shizura. The girl was standing with a glass all alone. The guy did not have time to approach his friend. Some gentleman was faster and already invited the beauty to dance. However, he received an unexpected refusal. The girl said that she did not dance. Let him invite someone else. A friend whispered to the confused guest that Shizuru wouldn't even look in the direction of a simpleton like him. She was from the Shuga family. Although there are rumors that today the girl refuses everyone at all, even rejected the heir of the Katahigi clan, the speaker continued that the man that such a beauty would look at must be special, but immediately fell silent. He mumbled something in confusion because he refused to believe his eyes. The heroine went to Makoto Yaimori by herself. Yuki had also noticed this and was now watching with obvious interest and surprise. Shizuru approached our hero and held out her hand, asking if he would like to dance with her. It was something incredible. The girl refused everyone, and then decided to take the initiative, and quite unexpectedly, the two young men muttered that it couldn't be, that her choice was a stranger who had somehow arrived at the reception. Meanwhile, Joe Ama, accompanied by a security guard, had already left the event, looking very pleased with himself. They approached the limousine, and the other bodyguards bowed as low as they could to their master. Ima walked over to the car and gave orders to keep no one near it and to keep some distance themselves. He repeated these instructions again to make sure that there would be no unnecessary witnesses to what would happen inside. The guard nodded and said that he understood everything exactly and would follow the order at any cost. The doors to the limo closed and the man went to the side where his colleagues were already waiting. Everyone was a little scared. The guards were talking quietly about how many people went crazy when they were alone with Mr. Ama. Others just behaved strangely, and some disappeared altogether. No one wanted to be in the place of the security guard who was now sitting in the limousine. The guys sympathized with him. Meanwhile, there were only two people in the car, Joe and the bodyguard who had accompanied him to the reception. Suddenly, the latter slapped his master across the face with all his might, calling him a complete idiot and a non-entity. He clutched his cheek in fright, hearing that he shouldn't have taken another woman's hand. Now Yuki would beat him up. Trying to justify himself, the one who was in the body of Joe Ama said that he was not prepared for such situations. The one who was in the body of the guard put a ring on his hand, all around shone with chi. He said that now let him not hope for an easy death. The transformation began. Now the guard assumed the appearance of a security guard, and Joe Ama regained his appearance. The exchange of bodies was completed. Now with his own lips, the master promised that he would not leave a single whole bone to the guard, since he could not cope with such nonsense. The real Joe Ama's eyes lit up with chi. after which he informed the bodyguard that he would not get out of here alive. It was time to start. After a while, he got out of the limo and slammed the door, and all the security guards bowed low. The master ordered the 2 bodyguards to go with him to the hall. It seems that he decided to return to the celebration. One of the men thought that the rumors were true. Only the gentleman got out of the car. They would never see their colleague again. While the guard was wondering what had happened, a bound young man who looked exactly like Joe Ama was moaning and groaning in the padded seat. He was crying at the realization that he would lose his life just because he shook Shizuru's hand when they met. At the reception, the fun continued. The musicians tried their best so that the famous guests would not get bored. Joe Ama approached his fiancée and apologized for the temporary absence. There was one urgent matter, but everything was already settled. The girl didn't even turn her head in his direction. She was watching one of the dancers intently, and the young man whistled. Now they were all looking at Shizuru, who was dancing around for the first time that evening, which surprised everyone. But most of all, she was surprised by how good the couple looked and how professional they moved, and she praised Makoto for the way he held himself. She herself moved as if she were floating above the ground, beautiful as a goddess, or at least a fairy. The young man was a little more restrained. The previous owner of the body was engaged in ballroom dancing, and now it came in handy. The musicians continued to play, and there was no couple in the hall whose dance was as beautiful as what our heroes did. Absolutely all eyes were turned in their direction. Some even allowed themselves to applaud. So beautiful was the moment. The girl once again thanked Makoto, noticing that he was dancing just fine. She was very happy. He smiled as he thought that body skills and the 3rd stage of cultivation, which allowed him to keep his balance, were a great combo. Shizuru held up a finger and instructively explained that they needed to make the right impression on the audience in order to do business profitably. Makoto Yaemori thought confusedly that as long as she was taking care of things, he could rest easy on the future of the pill and his finances. Yuki noticed that Yaemori was a great dancer. She didn't expect the guy to be so good at it. My aunt gave the girl a cheery look and asked if she regretted breaking off her engagement to our hero. Joe Ama also watched the couple closely while Amatani kept her mouth shut, avoiding answering the question. Nana asked if the young man really didn't know Yayori, and Yayori said that he did, because today was the first time they had met. The woman clarified whether even with Ama's connections, it is really impossible to check the exile's past. Joe laughed, saying that he wasn't going to cause trouble here in the Hoshisu clan's territory. Nana smiled that the funds weren't important. It was just that Makoto had an amazing talent for alchemy. And Ama was surprised. Watching our hero drink wine, the woman said that she only wants to direct these abilities in the right direction, providing them all with a wonderful future. Joe Ama turned away and hissed that Makoto Yamori should no longer be allowed to walk free. He also wondered if Nana Hoshikawa was threatening him. If Yuki hadn't been at the party, he would have gotten rid of her long ago. Looking at the cultivator, his enemy once again found himself thinking that this trash must be urgently eliminated. The 2 guys were talking about the guy next to Lady Shizuru from the Yaemori clan, which seemed to surprise both of them. Then, one remembered that the hero is Yuki's ex-fiancé and was surprised that he even came to this event. They continued to share their thoughts on the matter, praising Joe Ama along the way. Amatani was tired of listening to all this whispering behind her back, so she put down her glass and said that she was going to get some rest. Aunt Nana spread her hands, noticing that her niece, as always in her repertoire, was not shy about showing character. Meanwhile, Yuki went straight to Makoto Yamori and called out to him. She was clearly in a bad mood. The girl said that she knew exactly what he was thinking and why he came to the reception, even if he didn't want to pull off his dirty tricks. She shouted that the connections of noble people were much more complicated than they might seem, even if she didn't dream of joining their circle. The young man calmly and perplexedly looked at the former bride, trying to catch the train of her thoughts, but without success. Pretty ended up saying that making pills wouldn't make him rich, but it would be enough for him to live on, and let him stay out of the aristocracy. Instead of answering, the guy took a sip of wine, and Yuki turned around and walked away, saying that she should take care of herself. Only then did Makoto Yamori realize what she was talking about, and he chuckled and muttered that she didn't mean it that way. The girl heard and turned around, realizing that these words concerned her personally. Her eyes were full of confusion. The guy explained that she wasn't spreading spiritual chi around her because she couldn't control it. Stunned, the beauty asked him to repeat what he had said and asked when Makoto had been seeing chi. The young man explained that forced cultivation increases ki, but kills the body. In other words, her body is already at its limit. For a while, they just stood facing each other, as if the words had drawn an invisible line. Yuki asked how a mere mortal knew about this, and the cultivator replied that he could also solve this problem if anything happened. The former bride lowered her gaze and said that let the hero not even expect that she would believe. He closed his eyes and noticed that she could believe whatever she wanted, but if she didn't, she would regret it very much. He repeated once more that time was running out, that the girl would simply die in a little while, and her eyes glistened with tears. Makoto Yamori said that he can offer a deal. He has a small request that she can fulfill. The young man explained that he wanted to give something to Ama Joe. If he fulfilled this condition, he would help not to die. Then the guy started whispering a message in Yuki's ear, and her new fiancé watched them closely. The villain's eyes glowed with rage. Chi could be seen in them, and Ama hated Makoto Yaemori from the bottom of his heart. When the event ended, the guests began to slowly disperse, each waiting for a car. Makoto and Shizuru left the palace together. It couldn't have been any other way. They arrived together. They would leave the same way. They were already descending the stairs when they heard someone asking them to stay for a moment. It was Nana who informed the young people that she was very interested in the Juyin pills and would like to talk about the remedy. The three of them went for a walk in the garden, Shizuru chirping like a bird, stirring up interest in their wares. Makoto asked if the head of the Hoshisu clan had tried out his pills, and the woman smiled and asked him to just call her auntie. The boy became a little gloomy and replied that he couldn't do that because he was no longer a member of the Yaemori clan. Nana lowered her head and said softly that she and Yuki really looked alike, which surprised our hero. The woman explained that when the girl's parents died, the Amatani clan, led by her uncle, began to control her every step. Fortunately, Amatani's patrons, martial artists, noticed her gift, which allowed her to become a cultivator. But you can't escape from the clutches of the clan until you rise above death. Shizuru asked what it meant to be a cultivator and rise above death, and the words scared her a lot. Makoto knew that this meant going up to the third stage of cultivation, being stuck between the second and third, as if between heaven and earth. For the sake of quick power, Yuki had chosen the wrong path and was now hovering in interspace, destroying her body. The aunt confirmed that her niece was burning her life force for the sake of basic cultivation, and she was very worried. Makoto asked what he had to do with it. The woman replied that she was trying to save Yuki, but there was no cure, just like Shizuru's mother. Nana added that she really wanted to save the girl, and the young man silently thought he did not want to reveal his cards ahead of time. Auntie continued that she herself wasn't able to create the eternal youth pill, but the hero's skills were amazing. Maybe he could help. Shizuru was surprised to realize that Aunt Nana, the president of the Traditional Medicine Association, trusted Makoto more than the famous doctors. Although he really knows how to create talismans, the two women looked at him expectantly. Meanwhile, Yaemori himself was thinking that all the local cultivators were very stupid compared to the Luke continent. Their cultivation methods are primitive, and the concept of art is very vague, not allowing them to operate with too many skills. Meanwhile, Nana said that she also wants to participate in the youth pill business, and the Hoshisu clan offers the young man a deal. Shizuru was glad that with her aunt's support, their profits would increase tenfold, and the latter smiled that the girl in her repertoire only thinks about money. Nana explained that her main goal is to help Yuki. She is a nice and fragile girl, just a difficult character. The woman looked at Yaemori and said that when their engagement was called off, the beauty rebelled for the first time in her life. This information greatly surprised our hero, but he did not comment on what he heard, so as not to confuse the aunt with the idea. But it was the other one who did it, and Joe Ama called out to Nana, saying that he had been looking for her everywhere for too long. The villain came closer and said with a smile that he really wanted to say goodbye before leaving. "And thank you for a wonderful evening." The woman responded in kind, but Joe had already turned his attention to Makoto and Shizuru, noticing that they were also there. Looking the young man straight in the eye, his enemy thanked Yaemori for tonight. He added that he very much hopes that their paths will cross again, and extended his hand to say goodbye. Makoto returned the handshake and said that it was mutual. He also hopes that the meeting will be quick. This time, the feeling of being in contact with Joe Ama was completely different, as if he had become a different person. The cultivator definitely sensed the chi energy, which made him very puzzled as to whether the opponent was hiding it so skillfully. Streams of spiritual power swirled around the enemy, while he smiled benevolently, as if saying goodbye to an old friend. Soon the villain finally left the event and went to the car. The security guard helpfully opened the door for him. Before the master got in, one of the guys informed him that Miss Yuki had left a present for him. The young man accepted the blue box tied with a black ribbon with a smile, which pleased the scoundrel. Inside was a green butterfly made of paper. Why the bride decided to give him origami, Joe Ama did not understand. He tossed the box to his doppelganger, who was still in the car, telling him to hold it so it wouldn't fall off the seat. After that, the villain took out the same ring again and put it on his finger, muttering that it was time to stop joking. The blue energy streams flashed very brightly, and Joe Isa hissed that Yaemori was still as pathetic as before, and he thought that had changed. The young man's appearance began to change rapidly again, and he loudly said that he would deal with the weakling in no time. Taking the form of our hero, the heir of the Soma clan promised that he would deal with Hoshisho and Yaemori in one shot. The guy in the car started to shake violently as the gentleman ordered the driver to move. He was still holding the box with the paper butterfly inside, and it was starting to give off a faint glow. Soon the car pulled up to a high-rise building. Almost all the windows in it were dark. Only a few lights were shining. Standing on the roof of the skyscraper was Makoto Yaemori, who hadn't even changed out of his formal suit that Shizuru had given him. A matching green paper butterfly glowed on his finger, a tracking charm that allowed him to track down the right person. Our hero activated it. The butterfly became larger. He whispered that the meeting with Joe would really be fast as promised. Soon, the talisman finished its journey and froze. The right person was discovered. There was absolutely no doubt about that. The young man put it back on his finger and said to Nowhere that he was already going after his enemy. Let him watch out. He looked down to where the Ama clan's domain was and promised that he wouldn't destroy the building too much. After that, with a shout that he was coming, our hero jumped down and rushed forward to his goal, intending to destroy the enemy. Under the glass were two very rare artifacts: a mysterious golden flower, a gold element plant that blooms once every 3 years, and a reishi water spirit that matures once a year. Nana Koshiso looked at them and decided that she might as well apply these ingredients to the upcoming cultivator tournament. Then, the protective chi around the woman activated, and she looked around warily, asking who was there. Someone behind her said that her senses were still strong, as befitted a member of the 100 Herb sect. Even though her body and soul were crippled, she was still strong. It was a bald monk with a blood-red chi areole visible around him, and he clasped his hands in a welcoming gesture. Another one appeared behind him, and Nana realized that they were cultivators and asked who they were and why they were here. The woman was assessing her chances, against which she could still perform. But the monk said that the head of the Koshisu clan would not be able to escape. The second monk reported that the lion uses its full strength even when hunting a rabbit. They will not succumb because of its weakness. Nanu was silent for a while, and then said that her enemies were indeed very cautious, but they had come here anyway. The woman asked why the monks had decided to invade her garden, if they had forgotten all about the rules of decency. The fat man said that she would find out later if she agreed to volunteer to go with them. The second monk suggested that she not get too panky and immediately break her legs, and then drag her away by force. Kushisu put her hand to one of the large flowers and said that they would dearly regret coming to this place because there are so many interesting things here. She activated the plant, and the entire area began to fill with clouds of chi and some strange fragrance. The monks coughed. They quickly guessed that it was poison and now did not know how strong it was. The head of the Koshisu clan had an antidote in her mouth, but she could not assess her chances either. The fat man tried to cover his mouth and nose with his hand. His eyes became a little scared and his leg was shaking nervously. Nana knew that with the green heart grass in her mouth, she should be able to reach the exit in time. But this flower lord would bring down even an elephant. She didn't have much time. 2 opponents she still cannot overcome. The woman decided to run for her life as soon as possible. Suddenly, a huge black spot appeared above the head of the Koshisu clan leader, and red glowing eyes were clearly visible on it. The woman froze, as if fear had paralyzed her body, and there was clearly someone very, very powerful here. Looking around, Nana couldn't see the new opponent, but she guessed that someone was practicing the shadow art. Gradually, the darkness took on the shape of a man with red eyes who stretched out his giant hand towards her. Now, the woman was grabbed by this shadow fist, and she shouted that the enemies should identify themselves. Is this the hidden shadow sect? A man came out of the haze and claimed that they were the ones who had completely destroyed the 100 Herb sect on that memorable day. The man came closer and closer, his footsteps sounding intimidating as he uttered another threat. Nana couldn't look back as she was clenched into a fist, yet she screamed that the day of her death hadn't arrived yet. Then, the woman still managed to look around, and what she saw caused the cultivator to be genuinely indignant. Then she saw someone who looked exactly like Makoto Yamori, holding a yellow piece of paper that looked like another talisman. Meanwhile, the guards decided that since the shift change was coming up, it was quite possible to go out to the store and eat something hot. They didn't notice the pink glow of chi coming from behind the door and started guessing what Mr. Joe was eating. The 2 men headed down the street, not even noticing that someone who looked like Makoto Yamori had slipped out of Ama's office and then out of the house. Meanwhile, our hero was also right there, standing right in front of the entrance to his enemy's room. He checked again to see if the paper butterfly would fly any further, but it still hung motionless in the air. Our hero guessed that Joe was not in the office because he did not feel his presence there at all. Still, there was someone outside the door, and that person was busy eating a portion of instant noodles. There was a pathetic monologue coming from the TV, and the whole room was drab. The young man in the t-shirt and glasses kept his eyes on the screen, as if he spent all his time watching soap operas. Hearing the hero say that he sold out for a well-fed life, the man with glasses broke the fork in his hand out of rage. It suddenly occurred to him that he had also ruined his life out of the usual stupidity, becoming a hostage to his own ideas and the rules imposed by Joe Ama. The man remembered how then in the car, the villain tied him up, taking on his true form, but the bodyguard did not transform back, remaining in appearance Ama. He wasn't killed simply because the resemblance might still be useful in the future, in which case the copy could easily be sacrificed. And anyway, you can use it for personal purposes until you run out of steam. Joe adjusted his glasses and said that he would not deal with the doppelganger yet. He told the former guard that he was only alive because the master wanted him to be. Let him keep it in his head. He would never become an original. Now the former security guard decided that he needed to break his master's rules urgently in retaliation. So he opened the Yuki box, even though he was strictly forbidden to do so. The paper butterfly immediately lit up and rose into the air, fluttering out of its temporary confinement. The search talisman floated easily around the room, rising higher and higher, and he couldn't figure out what it was. When the artifact was near the ceiling, the prisoner realized that now he might lose it, but it was impossible to allow this. Immediately, a question came from behind him, horrifying the bodyguard, and a voice asked him who he was. It was Makoto Yaemori, and the fake Joe Ama fell backwards in terror, losing his balance after tripping over a bottle. He slammed his back down on the table and shouted that it was forbidden to enter here without the permission of the master, who was very strict. The hero mumbled that it wasn't surprising that he didn't feel any spiritual chi at the first contact, and then asked if the prisoner recognized him, who nodded and said that he was Joe Ama. With the words that he was a fake, the young man decided to leave the former bodyguard alone, heading for the door. But at the last moment, the guy stopped, and then approached the double, menacingly asking where the real one was. Meanwhile, the real one had already prepared an ambush on Makoto Yaemori's way to the house, and the bandit reported to the boss on the phone that they were on the spot. He proudly announced that he would deal with the student in no time, let the customer not worry about the result. Then one of the mercenaries reported that our hero was approaching, and the man with the phone quickly ended the call. Makoto Yaemori walked slowly down the street leading to the house, pretending to be completely unaware of anything. He thought about the fact that there were spirit artifacts in this world, which meant that there was a cultivator at least level 4 behind the great clans. The quality of such items depends on the skill of the person who created them, and on the amount of chi energy invested. In this world, there is a shortage of chi, so even at 4 levels it is impossible to create such an artifact, unless you resort to tricks. Our hero thought that there is only one explanation. The Ama clan has access to a spiritual source. He decided that as soon as he had finished with Joe, he would go in search of this source, so that he could make a breakthrough and return to the Luke continent. The road to the young man was blocked by the same bandits who pretended to be ordinary street robbers and asked where the guy was going. There were a lot of them, some with bats and other weapons, all smiling nastily in anticipation of the attack. The bandits asked Makoto Yaemori if he would like to play with them for a while, and their faces were extremely unpleasant. Instead of replying, the cultivator just glared at the leader, but that look sent goosebumps all over the scum's body. He specifically tensed up and began to stare at our hero in fright, losing all his fervor and enthusiasm. The confusion didn't last long, and a second later the man gave the order for the bandits to take him. The cultivator activated the chi energy and prepared to repel the attack easily and casually, as always. While the assassins were rushing forward shouting "Die," their leader was thinking that he had brought an elite. They would deal with everything quickly. When the bodies of his colleagues started flying past, he wasn't so sure. Makoto Yaemori wasn't so simple. From horror, sweat poured down the leader's face. He did not even have time to see off all the defeated people, whom our hero scattered to the right and left. The guy knocked down big men with one punch, and he did it incredibly fast. At the same time, the young man did not stop for a second, continuing to hammer with his hands without stopping. The leader was seriously frightened, and it dawned on him that a little more and the victim would turn into a winner, reaching himself. Grabbing the last of the defeated thugs by the shirt, Makoto Yaemori asked who sent them. It was obvious that he would get an answer anyway. The next morning, Nanakushisu's residence was experiencing some rather strange events. There were a lot of guards around, and everyone was exploring the area. One of the agents showed Ms. Yuki the surveillance footage, and the girl looked worried. When the man offered to watch the recording from the roof, the beauty did not even glance at the screen. She was thinking about her own. The agent cautiously reported that 2 monks appeared at the fence around midnight, and here is a still image from the video. He added that there were only 3 people who attacked Ms. Nana, but only one's face is clearly visible, and Yuki took the tablet in her hands. Her eyes burned with anger. She thought he was at a party. Now she wasn't going to hush it up? This was because it was none other than Makoto Yaemori on the screen, and he was smiling wickedly as he walked towards his aunt's mansion. Half an hour later, the girl's limousine stopped right outside the house of our hero. It was necessary to make sure that the address was correct. Yuki got out and started checking the satellite image to see if the house was the same as the one shown in the picture at these coordinates. The image on her phone matched what the girl saw in reality, and she immediately decided to go inside. The house at number 432 looked nice and well-maintained, but it was definitely not the residence of the Yaemori clan. It was too modest. Yuki furrowed her brows. Now she will deal with her ex-fiancé and find her kidnapped aunt. No sooner had Amatani crossed the threshold than she was met by a man with a cast on his arm, who informed her that Mr. Yaemori was resting. Yuki asked where exactly. She wanted to go inside, but the man replied that the owner was in the garden. He took the beauty to see her off, showing her various plants on the way, but she only thought about how many bandits and guards were on the territory. Estimating the number of possible opponents, the girl was a little afraid. There were too many of them. One battered thug was just serving our hero, who was sprawled out on a chaise longue. A drink? Yuki shouted that Yaemori should immediately release her aunt, otherwise she will destroy everyone here. The guy looked at the guest in surprise. She continued to approach, saying that she would not spare him, and that she was not afraid of all the bandits either. Hearing that Nana had been abducted, Makoto started to get to his feet, which was very bad news. The beauty poked him in the chest and ordered him to immediately release the captive. The guy replied that he had not kidnapped anyone. Yuki didn't believe him, and reported that he broke into Koshisu's residence last night and stole her aunt. There is evidence of this. The hero once again repeated that he didn't do it. Then, Amatari showed him the video from the roof, yelling at him not to play dumb. In the photo, the figure of a young man was indeed visible, and next to him was Nana, who seemed to be unconscious. The time in the picture showed that it was just past midnight. The young man's face was full of anger and glee. At the same time, he looked directly into the camera. Makoto Yaemori picked up the phone and took a closer look. It was obvious that Jo Ama had used the artifact to disguise him in order to frame him. Meanwhile, Yuki was already preparing to deal with him with her abilities, and chi surged around her. Then our hero once again calmly, almost by syllables, said that he was not there at that time. And there are witnesses to this. The beauty was confused because she saw the video from the cameras with her own eyes. It was not clear who to believe now. One of the bandits who served the drink said that at that time, he was with Yaemori on the orders of Jo Ama. The bandits were instructed to teach the student a lesson and bring him to the master. Yuki looked at her ex-fiancé more calmly and asked him to explain the video in this case. The young man said that he had a video from another place and it explains everything. On the phone screen, there was a double of Jo Ama. The man said that his name is Yasuhiro Yosa and he is a double, replacing the master at his first request. The master uses the ring to disguise himself as a security guard, and in general can take the form of anyone. Yuki's eyes widened. She had no idea that Ama could change her appearance. Makoto Yaemori added that this requires a special spiritual artifact, which explains everything, so don't let the girl get mad at him. The beauty was stunned to say that the spiritual artifact is the rarest and most expensive family heirlooms. Does her fiancé really have such things in everyday life? The guy explained that the villain kidnapped Aunt Nana to frame him, and Yuki then did all the dirty work, killing the enemy. The girl took off and shouted that she was going to Jo and deal with him. Our hero stopped her, reminding her that if you do this, your aunt will be a corpse. Amatari viciously asked what he was suggesting. Was it just watching? She was seething with rage and couldn't control her emotions. Makoto Yaemori calmly replied that they were quite capable of turning the villain's plan against him. Then, the cultivator said with a feeling that his enemy would dig his own grave with his own hands, "You just need to prepare a little. Let's go back a bit to the time when Ama dealt with Aunt Nana. He stole her spiritual chi energy. Having emptied the woman's supplies almost completely, she was left just lying on the ground as an unnecessary thing. Jo Ama was enjoying the new powers he had gained as a result of stealing chi, and he felt more powerful than ever before. The monks reported that if he continued at this rate, the master would soon rise to another level in the art of cultivation. The disciple has already prepared everything. If you add Yuki's ki, then the progress will be very big, a real breakthrough. Jo was looking forward to being able to enter the Ama clan's Council of Elders, so he had to start as soon as possible. He promised that he would then put in a good word with the master and recommend the monks to the Zen sect, and they were delighted. One of them added that yesterday Kosuko managed to kidnap Makoto Yaemori and asked what to do with him. The villain ordered to take the guy to the Kogen temple and make sure that he does not die on the way. He is needed alive. Ima stated that he would personally rip out the young man's tongue before allowing Yuki to finish him off. There were already quite a few guards gathered in the Kogen temple, all ready to carry out their master's further orders, but for now, they were just waiting. The men scratched their tongues in boredom, but the older man shouted at them to be quiet, to be sent here to guard the temple, not to talk. His colleagues didn't like this very much, and they began to accuse the boss of having only recently received a drop of power, and already began to be impertinent. The twists and turns stopped by themselves when the man saw that Jo Ama's limousine was approaching. The scoundrel walked proudly, looking forward to his breakthrough in cultivation, and was thanked for honoring the temple with his visit. The guard asked if the master would like to inspect everything before starting. They already have everything absolutely ready. Ima gave orders to turn off the radios when Makoto Yaemori arrived and ordered everyone to get down the mountain by then. The man was surprised, which angered the boss, who snapped that he wasn't going to discuss his own orders. It turned out that the guard was surprised that it was the first time Ama had addressed him by his first name, and not the instructions to turn off the walkie-talkies. After some time, the van that was supposed to deliver our hero here arrived. He parked near the entrance. Kogen was ordered to lead the prisoner to the garden where their master was waiting, and the hooded and masked man nodded. They started hurrying him, so he had to push Makoto Yaemori to move his legs faster. Jo Ama rubbed his hands together impatiently and greeted the young man with a smile, saying that he was very happy to meet him. The cultivator stared at the enemy and asked what exactly the enemy was up to. He didn't look scared. The opponent mockingly asked, "Did our hero think that this day would never come? Where did his arrogance from the party go?" He grinned mockingly, then proudly announced that everything was finally falling into place. Joe's eyes widened as he exclaimed indignantly that a small bug had allowed herself to talk to Yuki right in front of him, and now she was going to pay for it. He said that the main mistake was to trust Hashimoto. If he hadn't messed up, Makoto Yaimori would have been dead long ago. The guy pretended that he didn't know that Kusei was related to Ama, and asked why it was so difficult. Joe grinned again and asked if the young man really didn't understand why they had to kill him. Yaimori is a stain on his reputation. Such a loser as an ex-fiancé. It's a shame. Yuki is perfect and should belong only to him. Makoto quizzically asked if a human life could really be taken away because of such nonsense. Joe Ama activated the internal chi energy and stated that just killing the guy would be too wasteful. He activated one of the shadow spells and reported that it was a divine providence that was beyond the comprehension of an ordinary person. The cultivator carefully assessed what was happening and realized that his enemy had used the summoning skill. This was already something interesting. Joe explained that Nanakoshi's technique was useless, but her life energy was very strong and rare, and if he absorbed her shadow, he would become a true cultivator. Ama announced reverently that he would become what mere mortals call a god, his eyes glowing with delight. Makoto Yaimori wondered again if it would have been easier to just kill him, since it was so obvious. The villain began to rub his hands and said that Yuki probably just wants to do it himself. He left a recording of Nana's abduction to Hoshisu specifically. The scoundrel used the artifact again. His head was hidden by a dark spot, and the transformation of his appearance began. When his face looked exactly like Makoto Yaimori's, Joe announced that our hero would be the assassin of the Koshisu clan leader for the whole world. The young man sighed and said that such a plan looks well thought out, but in fact it is full of flaws. Aima was puzzled and asked what it was about and what our hero means. His idea is simply brilliant. Then Makoto Yaimori raised his fists and asked if Yuki had heard everything. He thought that was enough. The girl pushed the buff down and raised her cap, saying that she had heard everything that was necessary to draw the right conclusions. With burning eyes, she clenched her fist and hissed that she had heard every word and that her fiancé would be fully responsible for everyone. Joe screamed in fright that her aunt was all right. He just wanted to scare them, and then asked in horror why it was snowing. Key waves raged around the girl and she replied that she didn't care. Let her return her aunt immediately, or she would regret it. She added angrily that otherwise, neither he nor the entire Ama clan would escape a cruel reckoning. The scoundrel shouted in displeasure that the scoundrel Yaimori was just playing with him. Such behavior is completely unacceptable. The guy asked with a smile who was playing here, because Joe himself had just laid out the entire plan to the last word. The cultivator looked at the enemy with a slight smile and continued that, in other words, there was a complete idiot in front of him. Aima Yang managed to hold back and let out a heart-rending scream, which was the stupidest thing he had ever felt in his life. The girl turned to Makoto and said that she had already contacted her family, so our hero could safely leave. She looked at the guy and said that it was impossible for a mere mortal to defeat such an opponent. Because Joe is a cultivator, the villain began to seethe and hissed that the scoundrel had shamed him in front of everyone and that he would not get away with it so easily. He gave the order to kill the young man, and the two monks rushed forward with lightning speed to carry it out. Yuki activated her chi and jumped forward, covering Makoto Yaimori, and asked the hero to move back. The men slowed down, but also swirled streams of spiritual energy around to attack the girl if necessary. Joe Ama asked her to think carefully because he had her life in his hands. Just one call and the woman would die. He asked her to choose which was more precious to her, Nana's life or Yaimori's, and she looked puzzled and scared. Then our hero decided that it was time to show his true nature and asked the former bride not to worry. She did not understand. The girl continued to stare at the young man in disbelief, and he explained that her aunt was already safe. After that, the guy showed a video in which Nana Kosisa is taken out of the room in which she was imprisoned. Joe also looked and shouted that it was simply impossible how Makoto managed to bypass the guards and get the prisoner out. He saw that the hall prepared for the cultivation procedure was completely empty, which was the last straw. 15 minutes earlier, both the guards and Auntie had been on the descent from Mount Katazi, and Joe had reported that everything was ready. The villain ordered to wait there and guard Nana. At the right moment, they will receive all the necessary instructions. After telling him that he needed to make a phone call, the villain stepped aside, leaving the bodyguard somewhat perplexed. After making sure that no one was following him, Joe Ama prepared to change his appearance again. More precisely, it was the one who only looked like Joe Ama. In fact, it was our hero. He was just informed that they had come down from the mountain and were waiting for the arrival of the Amatani family. Now back to the scene with Yuki. Joe Ama was really angry when he realized that he was being tricked. He promised that Yaimori would answer for it. The girl looked at her ex-fiancé and thought that he had exceeded all her expectations and saved her aunt, and was holding up perfectly. He looked like a completely different person from Makoto Yaimori, who everyone thought was a loser and a weakling. Meanwhile, Ama gave the order to immediately deal with the enemy, and the artifact ring was clearly visible on his finger. The monks started advancing again. They had been waiting for this moment for a long time, wanting to curry favor with their master. Yuki rushed towards them to prevent them from hurting the young man who had done so much for her. Streams of pink energy swirled on either side of the girl, some new shadow technique. They swirled around the beauty's arms and legs, completely immobilizing her. Something Yuki wasn't prepared for. Ama shouted for them to kill without thinking, and the girl turned to Yamori and shouted for him to run away faster. She couldn't move. Meanwhile, the monks were already rushing towards our hero, hoping that he would become an easy prey. Their master waved his hand and said to Yuki that it was a big problem that she wasn't able to protect anyone. Amaterasu thought that it was her own fault for underestimating her opponent, and now they would all just die. Something strange was happening. Makoto Yamori just stood there, waiting for the enemies to get close to him. Both of them had prepared a chi attack and were flying forward at top speed, but they were puzzled by this indifference. Soon everything fell into place. Our hero's shoe flew across the face of the first one, and he simply grabbed the second one by the head. It seems that this was a favorite technique of the cultivator. In a split second, both monks were completely neutralized. After such blows, they had little chance to get up. Yuki couldn't help but exclaim in delight. She had no idea that her ex-fiancé would be capable of such a thing. Makoto Yamori used the Cloud Shadow step, showing off his full power. Suddenly, the thin monk began to blur, and it turned out that Ama was in his place, or so it seemed. A swirl of yellow energy swirled around the figure, returning the monk to the image that was chosen so that no one would notice the substitution. It was not easy to get a talisman that allowed this, and now the villain's face showed undisguised anger. The enemy was already visible behind him, ready for another attack, and he didn't give them time to think. Makoto Yamori flew forward like a hurricane, eager to show everyone who was in charge. Ama threw up his hand, trying to pull off another trick, but now he was really scared and shouted that he didn't expect Yamori to do this. The young man stopped, showing the amount of chi available for use. It was decent. Finally, the hero simply announced that he was a cultivator, so that the enemy would have no illusions that he could win. Yuki exclaimed that it couldn't be that her loser ex-fiancé turned out to be a real cultivator, but there was no doubt about it now. As Makoto Yamori approached Ama, enveloped in a flood of powerful energy, his fist was ready to deliver a final crushing blow, finally ending the confrontation. Our hero has been waiting for this meeting for a very long time, from the very moment he was undeservedly arrested by the police, from the moment he'd encountered the vile maniac Kusei who'd been hired to kill him, from the moment he saved the beautiful Shizura from death and torture, who became a true friend to him. Now he was standing in front of Ama, enjoying the thought of finally getting rid of the bastard. After saying that the scumbag stuck to him like an annoying fly, so the decision was made to swat him as soon as possible.